You really think scams are just for old people? A genius alchemist poured their heart into the craft for years, brewing potions so absurdly powerful they felt almost unreal, only to reach his village and get paid with nothing but bread. While the village elder, old and weary, Hag was sprinting through a full-blown scam. And the wildest part, he pulls off a miracle like it's nothing, using regular, everyday stuff like blades of grass and sharp rocks. Once he finally broke free and hit the city streets, all he could do was dream, dreaming like crazy of becoming a legend as an alchemist. But the whole industry is rotten to the bone. Now, with brand new friends by my side, and as an adventurer ready to dive into whatever comes next, he's moments away from blasting the world apart with alchemy. No one has ever seen him, ever. The tale kicked off with one of the villagers from Russia stepping right into the spotlight. Grumbling that today's youth have zero respect, he snaps, "Just let him give her that medicine and call it done. Because she's been out there hauling wheat since morning to night, body screaming in pain, and she's at the breaking point." Magna Grace, the protagonist. The 20-year-old alchemist snapped back, saying, "I already handed you a full month's worth of healing potions last week. You should still have some, right?" And the woman erupted in fury. So she'd already downed every drop, big deal. His potions were basically free, and the ingredients got hauled in from the village in every. In that village, nobody owned a thing, so he had no excuse to be greedy. Yet he still tried to explain that chugging too much of the healing potion could trigger nasty side effects. The old woman snapped back that she knew her own body best, and if she was drinking it, then she needed it, because he was still talking to her like she was some helpless kid. He shoved a crate of bottles into her hands and promised her another month's supply, then told her to stick to the dosage or else, and snatched the crate with pure annoyance, blurting out that he had zero reason to be stubborn. Then he let out a heavy sigh and realized he was the village's only alchemist. Russia, where people kept dropping by the year and the average age had already slipped past 6. Every single day he brewed crazy potions for the locals, and this morning the infirmary was packed wall to wall with people, even though, honestly, most folks didn't show up for treatment at all. They came just to hang out and swap stories, and he was the only young guy in the whole village. Then one day, our protagonist marched to an old woman named Yona. He asked how she was doing, and she said her body felt fine, until last week's storm ripped a hole in her roof. "Can you fix it for me?" she asked. He snapped back that he had an appointment today and was already collecting ingredients, and Yona shot back that she needed them right now. MC blurted in shock, like, "What?" And he could only think, maybe by the weekend, at best? He started thinking, being young might actually be worth it if everyone didn't dump all the work on me. And after a while, the protagonist began to dig. He checked the other village's arm, declared the fracture fully healed, and said he didn't need the stimulation potion anymore, until the man groaned, "My arm's still sore," and demanded more medicine. He figured natural healing was enough, and with a calm confidence, he fully believed everything would be fine within a week. The week dragged on, and the villagers warned him, "Your arm still isn't healed, so you'll go into town and grab supplies for the harvest festival." Then the weekend hit, the hospital shut its doors, and MC shot back that he'd already promised Ms. Iona he'd fix her roof, and that he'd get it finished right after. By morning, he'd bolt out and make it to that appointment by the next day, because when you're young, you don't just hope things work out. You better bust your butt even when you don't feel like it, because at that age, they've been catering to their elders ever since. Every whim these days, young people have zero self-control, and they can't protect themselves. Protagonist realized, day after day, that this was already how things were. After a while, he stormed out to hunt down ingredients for his potions. Suddenly, a monster lunged at him from behind. He yanked out a pistol and blew the monster away. Monster. Then caught himself and realized that even slashing through the monsters that threatened his village was his whole reason to live. Responsibility? Lately, it had started to feel like it was piling up on him way too fast. in too many of these monsters. On weekdays, he was cramming in patient after patient from early morning to deep into the night. On weekends, the villagers loaded him with endless errands, and he had. He didn't have a second to spare for himself then. After a while, the MC finally stumbled back home. Home dropped onto the couch and exhaled in relief, like he'd finally gotten rid of everyone for good. He hadn't even had a chance to bite into dinner, so he grabbed that unfinished bread and dried meat from earlier, staring at the basket. And you realize someone already chomped it. No doubt, it's Mr. Yago again. The worst part? The second he gets inconvenienced, he slaps on a clueless act like he understands nothing at all. He'll have to hunt down every missing ingredient, then crawl into bed, because once the hunger hits full force, he won't survive the night. MC stepped outside and thought, honestly, this life still isn't wearing me down. Yet, that is. That would be a straight-up lie, because he's drowning in responsibilities, and the fact that he's the only one who isn't old makes the loneliness hit even harder. And most importantly, in a dying village like this, there's no cash. People pay for treatment with barter, so he won't be able to save a single coin. Everyone acts like the young are forced to slave for the old, and nobody ever even bothers to say thank you. Thanks, seriously, that was the toughest part. But before I could breathe, the village headman, Matilda, showed up out of nowhere. He shouted to him, asking if he'd finally wrapped up all his appointments for the day. MC glanced at her and blurted, "Are you feeling sick?" Then he offered to take a look right there, only for her to shut it down, hand him a basket of bread, and insist it wasn't the problem. She figured he didn't even have time to bake bread with his work, so she showed up with it anyway. When he saw it, his eyes lit up. He couldn't believe she'd really brought it, and he asked her with a big, happy grin. The village. The village chief nodded and said, "Out here, there's no surviving alone. You lean on each other." Then praised him for doing what nobody else in this place can do. With his potion, even the elders can finally work the fields, and the chief even let her say her thanks in the only way she could. She smiled, thanked him, then admitted she was starving. And as he started to walk away, he caught himself thinking, yet. Yeah, this village has its fair share of nightmares, but here, nobody else even knows how to brew a single potion. And yeah, he's the only young guy around. If he leaves, this village is in real trouble, so he pushes himself to try. He tried, and honestly, it was fine. He could make it work as long as at least one person looked him in the eye and said, "Thank you," after. After a while, MC headed out and muttered, "I never dreamed I'd pass out while grabbing ingredients," then added, "If I catch a cold and have to shut the clinic, they'll start chewing out today's youth. Again." Again, he spotted strange people crowding the village square, and his gut twisted. Who in the world would show up at this hour? The village elder stood right beside a masked man, murmuring to him, and the protagonist couldn't stop wondering, who was this guy? He wasn't from this village, not even close. Right then, the masked man grabbed a flask of potion and bragged that it was top-notch, just like always. The village elder nodded and said it held a healing potion, a stimulation potion. He snatched the strength potion, and once he inspected the goods, he was supposed to hand her the money right away. But then the MC froze in shock, realizing it was the exact same potion. He snapped at the villagers, asking the man, "How about 3,500,000? And the village elder shot back, "What about that?" Day 2. He knew the war out west had sent medicine prices through the roof. So now, was he really willing to cut ties with a supplier this good? The man threw out an apology, asking if 5 million G was enough to make it right, and the woman agreed. They struck a deal, and he couldn't hide his shock. How in the world did their village alchemist crank out so many top-tier potions in such a short time? It was pure golden hands magic. The village chief smirked with pure sarcasm and bragged that his hands were top-notch, but his head was a total disaster. So toss him a loaf of black bread for 1 copper coin, watch him mutter a few words of thanks, and he'll grind his way through any work you demand. A godsend! At last! Someone sees it! When the protagonist heard that, his brain went blank, and after his shock finally faded, he sprinted, ran deeper into the forest, and after a while, the masked men climbed into a carriage and vanished into the distance. Someone scoffed, saying it felt weird. How could potions this top tier even exist without special ingredients? Where did they dig up the magical materials? And then, well, Then another guy asked, "So, you're telling me you're all just ordinary grass?" And he snapped back, "I'm ignorant." Like that was the answer. Yeah, sure. Does he really think real alchemy can be forged from that trash? Alchemy is ripping matter apart and rebuilding it with pure magical power. But every substance and living being hits back with resistance to magic. And that resistance is the first wall you run in. That kind of subtle magic, basically alchemy, just bounces right off this resistance. So only ultra-low magical resistance materials will work. Magical stuff so rare and pricey, it'll make your wallet scream. And the Alchemist Association has a monopoly on it. And they're almost never sold to the public. So what? Does he have some secret method? Another guy snaps back. What does it even matter? As long as they're raking in money, everything else is meaningless. Later on, the protagonist stumbled back home, dropped into his seat, and shouted in pure horror because the village headman was out there hawking potions to the residents, and the ones he handed out were the same ones he sold. Were they all in cahoots right from the start? That would explain why they burned through everything so damn fast. But no way, that can't be true. Yeah, he's not even part of the private Alchemist Association. And if some random individual hands out alchemical goods, that's a straight-up serious crime. They threatened him with death, so he got pulled into the crime before he even understood what was happening. Now he's stuck thinking, should I confess everything, or will that seal my fate? But either way, he can't keep living like this. Keep turning a blind eye and helping criminals. This has to stop, and right now. He'd taken every hit because he truly believed this village needed him, and somehow he kept breathing just to cling to those words. Words. MC stared at the necklace on his chest, and a rush of childhood memories slammed into him. Kid, his teacher looked him in the eye and said he was seriously talented at his craft. Like, the kind of talent that can't be ignored. Even at his age, controlling magical power that precisely was downright shocking, and she handed him a goddess. A statue's voice guided him and told him, "When you grow up, leave this village and head for the city. Your talent is too good to waste. With skill like yours, the Alchemist Association would even welcome you." The whole thing was done there. Then the protagonist froze, clueless, and blurted that he wanted to help her. The teacher fashioned a necklace right from the statue, saying that his wish was already enough. But now it was time for him to finally start valuing himself, because he wouldn't let a young man's future get tossed aside just to please old people. And deep down, he knew the world was way bigger than he'd ever imagined. And she was certain he'd hunt down the one thing he truly wanted to do. The protagonist stepped into the forest and muttered that choosing to go to the city was just the start. So what was he supposed to do next? He'd only been... Sure, he'd run errands for days, but with no friends he could count on, he was stuck doing it all alone. So what was he even going to do in this city, with nobody to lean on? And what was he chasing in the first place? Suddenly, screams erupted right near him. Right as the scream ripped through the air, a ruthless horde of goblins burst onto the scene. Beside the adventurer's carriage as it rolled forward, Lucia unleashed a cross-edge fist technique, striking like a blade, and smashed in with several devastating punches. Liz jumped in right alongside her, unleashing her brutal fighting style. A vicious, neck-shattering strike landed. Lucia's voice broke as she cried out through tears. They finally realized it. This was the end, and they were going to die right here. The girl snapped back that she'd told them to ditch the carriage and run, together. She screamed that if they dumped the cargo, they'd never see a cent. Then Liz snapped back, "Tell me what matters more, your life or the money?" Lucia snapped back that both mattered, and right then the carriage driver yelled that something dangerous was closing in from behind. At that exact moment, a goblin wound up to smash Liz from behind. Then, she shoved her aside in an instant and launched forward just as the blow was about to land, like she'd been waiting for it. The protagonist stepped in at the last second, snapped off a shot straight to the head, and laughed like he'd made it through by the skin of his teeth. Time stretched out, and Liz blurted, shocked, "Who are you?" But he flashed a calm smile and said he'd introduce himself later. First, he'd handle them. Those goblins. Burst into a furious, raging mass attack. He yanked a second pistol free and opened fire on them. Liz shot up, yelling that he wouldn't, snapping into silence before the sentence could finish. Push through and win while an army of enemies closes in. He'd never have a second to reload. Load. A split second later, the girl's ex. He blurted, shocked out of his mind, that he was firing without even... And just like that, without even reloading, our protagonist suddenly realized that the second he pulled the trigger, alchemy erupted to life. He tore alchemy out of the very ground beneath his feet, pulling it free like it was waiting for him. He yanked the material for the bullets, then pulled nitrogen straight from the air, shaping the next piece of the plan like it was already meant to fire. He laid out the ingredients for gunpowder, then built the bullet right inside the gun he synthesized. Bullet and gunpowder hit the scene, and he barrels in right away, then taps alchemy in a village where their magical materials were basically untouchable, so he drove himself past the breaking point, ripping anything apart into usable materials, even weeds, even. He churned out results by sheer force, crunching rocks into the work and paying with his own strength, because that's what his ultra-cheap alchemy was really made of. He couldn't forget what his teacher told him, that one day he might actually turn stone into gold. One day, the protagonist finally unleashed the golden transmutations. Skill and unleashed relentless gunfire, pummeling the last goblins without mercy, hammer after hammer. Suddenly, the biggest monster exploded into a sprint, charging. Lucia lunged forward and screamed that the bullets were way too small. They wouldn't let it go, so they just kept pushing until it was done. The goblins lunged to smash them, but the protagonist didn't even blink, saying the golden transmutation like it was the key to everything. Was the whole thing just riding on the source material? The bullet tore through. Then the fiery blast met that iron, sizzling it as it split open its path. In the blink of an eye, that massive goblin got ripped to pieces from metal blades carved through from the inside, and he collapsed hard onto the ground. Lucia gasped in shock. Was a sword really jutting out of that goblin? The MC hurried up to the carriage driver and demanded, "Are you all right?" Then the man beamed as he thanked him, shouting that he'd saved them all. Then he trailed off. He strode up to the girls and told them he thought they were hurt a little. Then the protagonist. Paganist grabbed a handful of wildflowers right there nearby, slammed a healing potion together without wasting a second. With his golden transmutation scheme blazing into action, he slid the skill into their hands and then, boom, the driver got shot. He's stunned, wondering if he just brewed some kind of potion using a plain old herb. Liz thanked him and promised she'd pay for the potions immediately. Then he waved it off, saying he didn't need a thing. He wasn't registered as an alchemist, and he couldn't charge a single coin for the potions he'd forged. Mushia snatched his hand and blurted, "Come on, let's go!" At least let him stick around long enough for her to thank him first. She was thanking him. No kidding. And MC couldn't believe what he was hearing. Really. He finally believed his mind had snapped back and that he'd remember exactly what he wanted. He just wanted to make everyone smile, because that's exactly why his knew. His teacher drilled alchemy into him the moment he hit that first step. At last, he threw himself into the Alchemists Association and officially took his place among them. He finally became a real alchemist and used that power to save people. The carriage driver grinned and said, "We've run into a real genius alchemist," then leaned in like it was fate. "And you're heading to the city too, right?" "Right?" He nodded along, and then said he'd head straight to the Alchemist Association to get his license. He shot back that it was awesome, then said they were heading into town. Sure, it wasn't exactly some grand life-saving rescue, but it was their move. But they could toss him a ride on a cart, and he snapped that it would be a huge help. Lucia grinned and said, "That'll help me too. Imagine having a brother like him." so she'd never fear a single monster. Liz reminded them that their real job was security, period. After a while, the villagers rushed up to the headman and raged as he reported that bastard furiously had vanished without a trace, and she swallowed hard as she realized every last valuable was gone. Even the travel bags, he suddenly clocked he was being played, bolted, and the villagers erupted in screams. So now what are they going to do? They finally tasted real abundance, and there's no way they're going back to starving on that miserable black bread. The headman yanked the crate open and cracked the potion's seal, and demanded where he could have vanished to. Just for the answer to hit, he'd gone straight into the city. That. It was obvious as day, and then she'd chase him down and grab him, then she shot her hands forward, starting the move, handing out strength potions and grinning wickedly as he blurted out that this degenerate had totally forgotten who fed him and kept him sheltered him. Then he took off, ditching the old folks and leaving them stranded on their own. He's left to rot in the village by himself, so yeah, that's why today's youth are turning out so weak. One of the locals gulped the potion and, whoa, felt its effects hit hard, fast, and strong. His strength surged to new heights, and he snapped with furious certainty, declared it was time to smack some sense into this stupid kid. They wouldn't let him leave. Caring for the elders is the young one's duty. After some time, our protagonist, Alchemist and the adventurers rolled into the Kremlin, right at the base of the mountains, and straight to the Alchemist Association, the Kremlin branch. Lucia spun around in shock, staring at how massive the building was. He explained that the Alchemist Association controlled the market on every magic potion and artifact, so they were rolling in money, and honestly, he got off easy. Lucky. Right now, the association was blasting an insane recruitment push, and they were saying and because the war in the West was raging, they were stretched thin with too few hands, and the MC still remembered how that merchant who showed up in the village had mentioned. He slipped out near the building, thanked them, and the driver flashed a grin like it was the best part of his day. And he shot back, confident that his skills would have him passing that exam for sure. Both girls shouted, "Good luck!" and the protagonist grinned and realized, wow, Lucia and Liz were the real deal, genuinely good people. People like his luck had finally flipped on, and the good streak was just beginning. Once he rode out of the village, everything shifted. Then he came straight at his next target. He marched up to the association's entrance and announced, loud and clear, that he wanted to sit for the entrance exam. Right as he arrived, a worker lunged forward and shoved a crumpled piece of paper into his hands and ordered him to fill out a form, name, birthplace, and every bit of past experience. Then he should rush to the courtyard, because that's where the exam is about to happen. The MC started scribbling on the form, and it hit him that this was the moment he'd finally tear himself free from that. He tore out of that village and plunged straight into the classroom to become a real alchemist. He lunged toward his desk and blurted out in shock, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Someone had set up a serious alchemy setup right here. This wasn't a game. He'd already grabbed the teacher's old gear before, but it didn't even last a moment, and it crumbled fast. With gear like this, he's going to nail his synthesis even more precisely than before. The protagonist whipped his head around the classroom, caught his breath, realized the place was packed to the brim, and a weird, uneasy feeling hit him, because everyone seemed to be staring. Everywhere he looked, it was alchemists, just alchemists, and he'd never once met a soul besides his teacher. He spotted a girl nearby and froze in shock when he realized she wielded a quartz rod, an ultra-prized tool that cranked her alchemy into overdrive and boosted the whole operation. Even the others rolled up with their gear, and yeah, this form had a spot where you had to write down the name of your alchemy school. He totally left it blank, then couldn't help but wonder what schools the others had actually graduated from. Something started to feel really wrong. Then, right on cue, the teacher burst out to them and said the moment had finally arrived, announcing, juggling the moment right before an unforgettable enrollment exam could begin. They got told to yank open the wooden boxes sitting right in front of them. Inside, their assignment waited for the protagonist. Crack open the box, then spot the healing leaf sitting there, ready to change everything. It was obvious just from the look of it, it radiated serious healing power. Properties. He'd never laid eyes on an ingredient this top tier. Then one of the girls suddenly went, "Hey!" She snapped in fury. "What is this low-grade garbage? I've never seen quality this awful, even among Class B stuff." Another alchemist barked that the teacher treated it like a useless weed, barely worth calling alchemy. Richard snapped back that it wasn't some mystery at all. It was plain defective stuff, the kind people toss straight in the trash. But just recently, everyone started craving healing potions, and production got slammed into overdrive. No time to spare. They couldn't keep up with the demand, so they slammed in a special call, using even the defective material instead. Tell them to use it and whip up a healing potion using the alchemy tables they provided, as long as they bring their own gear and the basics. Basically anything else on the site, because that was the whole point of today. Today's test, one of the alchemists snapped in pure frustration, saying they were going. Yeah, no way they taught recycling trash at alchemy school. They totally glossed over that. The teacher told them, if you can't handle it, you can walk away, then immediately added that they needed people who could jump in and start working right now. A terrified girl blurted, "What do I do?" Because it felt absolutely impossible to turn that kind of material into a healing potion. One of the alchemists finally gave up and headed for home. Completely baffled, I just stared. What in the world was happening? Everyone kept complaining about that one ingredient, and they were, "So you're just gonna ditch the exam because of that?" Yeah, it totally spoiled the mood. But compared to the weeds he usually wrestles into healing potions, this was way simpler to sort and process. And it was packed with even more valuable components. And if he put that kind of work in, that alchemy table was pure genius. He could craft more than healing potions from it. But if even a full restoration elixir won't answer that question, then what is he supposed to pick? He was absolutely locked in to ace the exam on healing potions. If he deliberately held himself back, no, the bigger plan swallows the smaller one too. Because there's a healing potion that, it just sips your strength back in, and then bam, there's a full recovery elixir that completely repairs both your body and magic. Nothing even comes close. If he has no education, then how would he... When else would he prove he's got real power, unless he steps up right now? The protagonist snapped himself back together and kept going. And he blurted that he was going full throttle. Then, right on cue, a furious Professor Klaus stormed over. The teacher demanded, "Who is this private alchemist from the village? How dare he be a candidate when he never even graduated from alchemy school? Who would let that trash sit for the exam?" She blurts it out, all fired up. "Isn't that..." And her voice cuts off right there. Possible? They said anyone could get in for the extraordinary recruitment, no matter what. The professor snapped, "I'm an idiot," and said that with no requirements, it doesn't matter which school you graduated from, so can they really accept people with zero education at all? And where the heck is this guy? The teacher snapped and pointed at the MC, demanding they boot him out right now. Then it hit. They were just in time, because he had barely finished and was about to hand in his work, finally here, a full recovery potion. He could have crafted a healing potion before it all went wrong. He even crafted a healing potion, and with magical materials plus top-tier gear, he set out to forge the absolute best version. Then Klaus snatched the flask. He checked it with his appraise skill, and the result was downright shocking. Turns out it was a real full recovery potion. One gulp and your physical strength and magic come roaring back to 100% instantly. The professor smirked, insisting this was the real deal, a genuine full recovery elixir. And then, suddenly he yanked open the flask, dumped the contents straight onto the protagonist, and rage exploded in him. Curiously demanded. He shot back, "Do you think we're idiots? Because if you believe that, then creating a full recovery potion forged from healing potion ingredients. Materials. He rolled in finished goods, right? Let them throw. Toss that swingler out right now. MC's stuck, totally baffled. She screamed through her plexed grip, yelling that yes, he truly did make it from those materials. If they don't trust him, he can pull it off again, right here, right in front of them, Klaus insisted. Like, this is exactly how it's supposed to go, and they should have handed him over to the guards, because the wild part is, they actually let a random private nobody in. Spilling onto the premises was already a disgrace. May he never set foot there again. Stepped right in front of him again. Then, right after that, our protagonist. He got tossed out of the association, dropped to his knees in pure terror, and swore this couldn't be real. Yet, they didn't believe a single word. Even though he still used the assignment's materials. MC couldn't stop thinking it was the healing potion he'd just made, until he shook his head. No, that couldn't be it. That was definitely not the truth, because the moment you laid eyes on the other, his instincts screamed that something was off, and the association alchemist's reaction proved it. Crafting a complete healing potion for the ordinary world out of that kind of material was wildly out of the ordinary. One day, he might even forge gold himself. Those were the teacher's words, like a promise carved in stone. He kept telling himself she was only cheering him on, because he had no idea what other reason he could possibly have missed. Other alchemists could do that too, but maybe he was the one who'd break the limit. Maybe he was. So he's the strongest alchemist. Cool. If he's not part of the association, then he doesn't get to sell a single potion. So his alchemy is useless. And now what? Suddenly the same adventurer girls closed in, and Lucia beamed as she asked him, "Did he finish the exam already? That was insanely fast. Liz, smile." Smiling grinned and said, "With what I can do, there's no way I didn't pass, right?" The MC looked crushed as he admitted he never got the chance. Then she stunned him with the truth. Shocked, even asked, how could they really stop him, despite everything he could do? So yeah, the exam was dead serious. He leaned in and told everyone, this exam is... It was simple enough, and then the protagonist leaned in and laid it all on the table for them. Liz was not having it. Displeased, she snapped that it was terrible, and they didn't even listen to him. And Lucia kept it all away just because he was a private trader, so she couldn't help asking, is he even on his radar right now? Right now, he's unemployed, so he barrels into town to join the Alchemist Association. But of course, they won't let him, right? Yeah, he nodded fast, nerves everywhere, and the girl snatched it up. Grabbed his hand and practically dragged him into the adventure with them, Liz blurted out in shock. What are you suggesting? Out of nowhere, Lucia leaned in and demanded, so what's the big deal with Blue? Magna's rock solid, and honestly, it's way better for him to stick with them than those blind folks who never saw his brilliance. The girl shoved her forward. She snapped at them and made it clear no one gets to decide for him. MC shot back. Nope, I was right all along. What nonsense was running through his head? Just because. Just because his potions couldn't get sold didn't mean they weren't worth a fortune. Some folks clocked his alchemy the instant he stepped in, while others threw their full belief behind him. And yeah, that was the truth, so the protagonist leaned in and asked if they wouldn't mind. Liz blurted, shocked. Do you think they'll actually take him onto the team? He didn't hesitate to agree, but he still rolled into town only because the Alchemist Association was there. Didn't he just? He smirked, nodded in total agreement, and then, right there, he added that an adventurer's work mattered just as much, taking down dangerous monsters, and racing into brutal dungeons to steal back useful artifacts was also part of society's survival. And if he had to pick between bowing low and begging those people to accept him into the association, and suddenly, everything felt better with both of them there, Lucia burst into joy and jumped. She lunged on him and loudly welcomed him to their team. While Liz shyly barked at her to act normal, she still couldn't stop smiling. She let out a joyful shout like, "We finally have a healer now!" and clung to him. No way she was letting him go. MC stared at his choice and realized this was the kind of life he'd be chasing as an adventurer. Then, sometime later. Hours later, the association exam finally ended, and Klaus stared in disbelief because out of more than 50 candidates, only 2 made it through. The teacher snapped that most of them couldn't even focus their magic through the material the right way. Other alchemists started whispering that you could pull out the active components and slice through magical resistance. The distance demanded serious skill. Maybe that task was just too brutal after all. Right then, the girl shot the teacher a shaky glance and blurted out, are you? She wasn't warned that anyone who failed would be kicked out, so when the student answered, he said that. But that story was a lie, because the man beside her hadn't cheated at all, and at first, she didn't believe it either, until he used alchemy with razor-sharp precision, and just like that, he pulled off a complete recovery. Klaus was clutching an exam-made recovery potion, so shocked she couldn't even find the words to speak before it all slipped into a... With a stone-cold serious face, he snapped that it was nonsense, because a full recovery potion demands dragon tears, ether ore, fairy dust, and 12 other rare magical ingredients, plus something pure. Gold alchemical cauldron, no shortcuts, no mercy, just that one choice to get it made. What she was going to do was spouting stories that sounded like fairy tales, turning plain stone into gold with magic. Charlatans spin the same old lies to hoodwink the unsuspecting, so let her watch closely. He was seconds away from ripping off his mask, only joining the alchemists is no walk in the park. Miss the association, and fraud always seems to follow, and they've been training for it for ages. Klaus kicked his skill into gear and said the sand of time is a magical catalyst, something that yanks time backward and rewinds the matter itself. With this, the moment that material snaps back to how it was before the synthesis, the deception screams off the page, because the second he casts the spell, a healing leaf pops into existence. It poured into the flask, and the room went silent. Then everyone snapped into shock and burst into loud shouting. He shouted that there weren't any dragon tears or ether ore here at all. Klaus couldn't even wrap his head around it. Horror swallowed him as the truth hit. Could he have gotten it wrong? No, there's no way. How? How on earth could he screw up something as simple as an appraisal? No way he didn't misjudge it, because this was definitely A. They grabbed the recovery potion, then the real trouble crumpled into the sand. Time sand skill? Nah, that... Professor Wiseman himself personally built this whole thing, like that was the only move, period. If it was perfect with no cracks at all, could he really have pulled off a creation like that and not a single flaw? A full recovery potion brewed from such trashy ingredients that it still somehow worked. Klaus crumpled to the ground, drowning in sheer shock after a... Okay, wait, who the heck is this guy? After a little while, the MC started obsessing over adventurers, as people who snap to orders from regular citizens. And sometimes even the government steps in, shielding VIPs and tearing through the enemies. They unleashed their monsters and plunged into dark dungeons to uncover what lurked in every shadow. Dungeons, and sometimes even something as simple as that. Simple housework. Jobs barely landed in town before he'd thrown himself into Lucia and Liz's Cat's Paw group, joining up with them for good. He immediately kicked off his life as an adventurer, right away, without hesitation, though they... So yeah, they're still brand new too, and their group rank is only 1 so far. Star, they still haven't gotten any real orders, so their very first task is figuring out how. Was sprinting through a mountain village harvest, pitching in wherever he could. Then, right after that, they stormed the site and started picking the apples Lucia told everyone about. He shouted at Magna and demanded he take a good look at just how many they'd snagged. So many, it stunned the room. Those things look insanely delicious. Maybe they can grab at least one and chow down. He shot back, "Of course not." And the customer himself grinned like he knew something. They let the new team give it a shot and said this year's harvest was... The harvest was overflowing, so nobody should hold back. so the protagonist snatched that apple. And then he caught himself thinking, wow, these people are genuinely kind. At first. At first, he figured it was some shady order, but something about it just didn't add up. He got it wrong. Just moments ago, they'd already reached the adventure. Magna charged straight toward the registration debt, and you could feel the trouble coming. Desk. The workers snapped at his registration documents. Now all that was left was to apply for a guild card. Could he leave a blood seal on a scrap of paper? It's basically an adventurer's ID. One drop of their blood, and it tells everyone their status. He then translated it into a number, a level, and that level decided everything because it directly controlled his guild rank. So you're strongly encouraged to update that card at least once a year, because guild rank is all about the group's achievements and how high its members stand. It goes from 1 star to 5 stars, and the more stars you stack, the tougher the job gets, but the payoff gets bigger too. It's the rules they must follow. This whole system keeps adventurers from grabbing quests they can't handle and from crushing their clients' trust. A legendary 5-star squad is feared and admired everywhere. They're so respected, they're basically untouchable, even still. Was said to be invited to the royal banquets, yet it takes about 10 whole years to climb 1 new star, so he's got to stay patient and keep pushing. The protagonist grinned as he stamped it, then realized, yeah, this really was a brutally long road. Journey. She promised him that as soon as they were done, his official registration would be complete and the guild card would be ready in about 10 days. Then they would ping him the second it was ready. After that, he jogged back to the girls nearby and blurted out that registration was finally done. Now the real question hit. Did they snag a good order, and was Lucia really the one checking the quests? Replied no. Things were straight up bad, with almost 0 decent orders coming in for their 1-star group, and Liz at. He basically shrugged and said, there's barely a choice here. So tell me, do you really want to walk away? He wanted to stick with them. If they saw what he could do, they'd have welcomed him into the next higher-ranked crew. The MC flashed a grin and said everything was okay because he literally picked up adventuring the moment they pulled him in. So why does it feel like she's not thrilled he's tagging along with them? Liz snapped, not at all. Then she leaned in and added, on the contrary, he's super reliable. At that exact moment, Lucia blurted out that this is seriously awesome. They sent a desperate note asking for help with the village harvest, and the paper spelled it out. It's a super simple job anyone can do. Pay starts at 500,000 G with bonuses for results, and they even say the women do an amazing job. Plus, they promise this warm, family-like atmosphere. And MC can't help but feel it's way too perfect, like something's definitely suspicious. Lucia burst out with pure joy. We're paying 50 times more than that last security job! And yeah, that's absolutely insane. He just laughed and said, yeah, it's downright insane. So what do you think Liz says? She blurted out that this was their golden shot. Better grab it right now, because someone else will snatch it up first. He snapped. Are you serious? Because this ad practically oozes darkness out of every single line. Lucia jabbed a finger at the paper and snapped, look here, right now! Then she cut off, like the secret was about to explode. They say it straight up. There was a white order written there. He snapped in confusion, asking if it was truly white. Why would they ever put it in ink like that? Liz said she got his worries, until the order looked suspicious, and the guilt followed. So we just filter it out, right? She snapped her head toward the employee and asked, is that true? The girl nodded with a sweet smile and added, they told him that to place an order through the guild, he had to prove who he was and pay a reward up front. Lucia laughed with relief, swore everything was okay, and said they'd take the order. Then moments later, they finally arrived. Inside the village, he started snatching apples one by one, and the MC couldn't shake the feeling that maybe he was overthinking it. But the village was burned into his mind, and those nasty memories wouldn't let him breathe. The village felt alive with young faces everywhere, so maybe it wasn't as shut off as it seemed still. And still, it felt weird then, right on cue, one of the villagers shouted, He swung by, thanked them like crazy, and told them to stop by any time. Storm into the village chief's house and report everything back. A piping hot apple pie waited there for them, like a sweet victory they could taste. Said the reward was already more than enough. He felt painfully awkward taking the treat, and Lucia snapped out in furious rage. With pure rage in his chest, because the village chief himself was handing it to them right now, and if they let this moment slip, unless they get a shot right now, they'll never taste apple pie on their own dime. The local made sure of that. Yeah, and they basically said the same thing. Young folks shouldn't be out here looking so rough. Shy. Then they hauled themselves all the way to the village chief's house. Right there, they got hit with a surprise. Old Zach himself welcomed them. He introduced himself, thanked them for being incredibly helpful today, and then, right as the harvest. This year's harvest was so wild and abundant that it couldn't find enough hands to bring it in. An amazing kind of trouble, really. And that's when MC stepped in and asked, "So that's why you dangle that massive reward in front of everyone," the village chief shot back. With a grin, they applied it, and thankfully, they were doing just fine. Right then, servants rushed in with food and drinks. He clocked the apple pie and apple tea, made from the best apples in their whole village, then swung it into motion, telling them it was a simple treat, but insisting the protagonists try it, because the second they did, the moment changed. He quietly tapped into his analysis skill and started dissecting the ingredients piece by piece. Flour, animal fat, a punch of salt, and a pile of apples. Rum, kuzu starch, and aconite. 3 ingredients that sound harmless until you realize what they can do. He ripped the tea jug open and blasted it straight over them. The old man slams the table to the floor and snatched a pistol and barked orders. Everyone gear up, because battle was about to erupt. The protagonist leaned in and warned that the pie was loaded with poison. That dose hit like a switch, straight up immobilizing them. For a whole day, he was desperate to finally hear the meaning of such hospitality. Zach serious. It looked like they were cornered, like they had no choice but to let them. They snatched them on the spot. Then, out of nowhere, the locals bolted into the scene. Barreling into the village chief's house with guards flanking him, weapons ready. With gardening tools, the MC instantly launched his spell right on the spot. They cast magic and conjured a mountain of it, an endless flood of greatness. He set his traps right at the entrance, then muttered that he whipped out alchemy and slammed together a barricade to block the way. So they can finally explain why they tried to poison them. Or was that a different story entirely? Was it because this village was broke to the bone? Village. Lucia insisted it was true, and Liz shot back, "That's? Now that I think about it, not a single child showed up after they arrived." Zach flat out said it was true. No reason to keep pretending anymore. "Everybody drop your weapons, right now. A week ago, a savage monster gang, spearheaded by a beast tamer, stormed into their village and tore it apart. They were terrifyingly overpowered, so even their own guards couldn't stop them. They wiped out the people almost on the spot, then snatched the kids and vanished. The monsters warned them. If they wanted their little ones breathing, they had to bait adventurers into the village. And bring them in alive, yeah, their gear and bodies fetch a fortune, so that's the standard. If they miss even once a week, their kids don't just suffer, he turns them into food for his adorable little animals." MC said, "So they picked them for a reason." And Zach snapped back, "That means..." Once their kids and weapons were ripped away, they were left with nothing, no choice at all. And still, that wasn't a free pass. Whatever the reason, they were scheming to drag them into a trap, and that was unforgivable. But he turns back and demands, "If anyone's going to do this, if someone's getting punished, it's going to be him, because he's the village chief." The chief froze. He couldn't stop the disaster, and he failed to keep the village safe, letting people get pulled into crime. The protagonist shot back, "No way, I don't think so." Then he slammed the truth down. He's the one who hurts the most, and he's been hurt the longest. And the real culprit is the person who shoved them straight into this mess. He's itching to pull them aside and ask for help. Will the others join him too? Both girls lit up and said yes right away. Zach asked if that meant he wanted their help. MC nodded and agreed. They nodded, then swore they'd smash the beast tamer and pull the kids to safety. But one of the villagers blurted, "No way," because there were at least 20 goblins right there, and next to the beast tamer stood this towering monster that looked like a full-blown demon, and there was no way they could take them all down. One other woman warned that if they went after the children, they'd all be slaughtered. When the protagonist heard it, he dropped to his knees, nodding in agreement. He added that even if they won, they still wouldn't have time to reach the kids, so they needed an army to start their plan, to end it all in one clean strike. And that's how he planned to do it. He'll forge them into an unstoppable army. He carved a massive pentagram into the floor, then he cracked out golden alchemy and forged a hole. He ripped a massive stash of weapons, armor, and potions from everywhere around him, right down to pieces of the house itself. Lucia snapped in shock that the house had become a weapon. MC just smirked and said he'd use everything around him. He moved around them and forged weapons for everyone. Then he readied himself for full-on combat potions. And even after all that, they'll still insist it's impossible. Just when it seemed impossible, the old man snatched a sword and shouted that he was right. They took the brunt of it all, and they're hunting this bastard with a fury bigger than anyone else's. Everyone, grab your weapons, because after this, every villager is about to get swept up in what comes next. They geared up, waited just long enough, then launched a brutal attack. The monsters. In the chaos of that brutal fight, the humans quickly surged ahead and started gaining. Gain the upper hand, the chief beast tamer blurted out. How in the world did they get their hands on all these weapons? But even then, he pulls out his trump card, and the archdemon steps in too. At that exact moment, the MC had already obliterated everything completely. He obliterated that giant monster, then shaking, he demanded, "Wait, are you saying you're talking about this useless carcass? If he didn't want to keep racking up more injuries, he'd better do something. Fast." He should have thrown in the towel right then. The rest of the villagers burst in. He stormed in, and the beast tamer threw in the towel, crumpling onto his knees, and then every single child. The kids were finally freed, and the protagonist broke into a smile as the moment hit him. Even with a few little bumps along the way, his very first adventurer's mission landed as a total win. After a while, they tore back to the guild building, right where the answers waited. The worker slammed both hands on the table, dropped her head, and blurted out a loud, heartfelt apology. Lucia stared, totally confused, and blurted, "Wait, what just happened?" She swallowed her nerves and admitted the guild leader already laid it all out, because the guild itself had approved that deadly order. They paid the price, hardened their checks, and made sure the mastermind behind the crime would finally face the consequences. Held to the law, they shut it down. Then the girl blurted, buzzing with excitement, "What crime? Like all they were doing was harvesting crops, and then the monsters showed up out of nowhere, and they got wrecked in a brutal beatdown." Wait, is that really true? Because the protagonist is standing there with a totally confident look. She nodded back like, "Yeah, it's true." Liz fired off the idea that the boss probably smacked his head pretty hard, and the worker grinned. "If we're all agreeing on that, then I'll make sure those shady proof pieces vanish." She burst out laughing, begged them to quit bringing up sad stuff, and then made it clear she just wanted to see the money. Already 500,000 G in her hands, and she'd been pacing for it all day. MC snapped back that money mattered, so even if they split it 3 ways, it would still stretch long enough for them to get by. They talked for about 3 months. Then the worker finally showed up and handed over the money. And instead of just $500,000, he dropped an insane $3 million straight into their hands. Million G. Lucia's voice cut through the shock as the 3 of them froze completely, stunned out of their minds, and she asked, "Are you?" right before the words trailed off. He mixed it up with somebody else's reward. Then the worker grinned back at him with that smile that, no mistake, Turns out the beast tamer was the wanted lord of 100 demons, and the bounty for killing him was 2,000. They slapped in that extra 2,500,000 G into the payment. Lucia, still in pure disbelief, blurted out, "Wait, is this whole thing actually adding up to 3 million in orders?" The girl leaned in and said, "Yeah, it really belonged to you. But there's one more thing." Then she cut herself off, like the next word was too dangerous to say. Starting today, the Cat's Paw crew got bumped up to a 3-star group target. Promotion sealed, no turning back. Later on, the three of them piled into a restaurant, and Mushi burst out, "We're gonna—" They raised their cups to the successful mission, the promotion, and Magna's debut as an N. Adventurer. All that grinding paid off, and it hit like the sweetest victory, because after everything, today the leader is set to— Liz snapped, "Whatever, eat and drink as much as you want." Then her mood hit rock bottom. They swore Magna was the one who actually knocked down the beast tamer, and somehow they barely pulled it off. The MC snapped back, "That's not true." They'd saved the children, so now he could move forward without once looking back. Lucia grinned and said, "Yep, we gave it everything we had." This is the best possible outcome. Cat's Paw as a whole just nailed a victory. The protagonist shoved a mug of alcohol into her hands and told her she needed to speak up too, and Liz finally started to calm down a little. Lucia snatched the mug and nodded like it was settled. Then everything began to fall into place. Happily, he said it was finally time to step into the dungeons, MC. He asked her straight up if she truly wanted to go there, and she nodded, then quickly explained why. Endless dungeons yawned under the whole continent, and they didn't just hide gold and treasures there. Something bigger was buried in the dark. There, and buried there too, were ancient artifacts, because if they ever uncovered something like that, they'd be set for life. To work again, and they even teased there were secret dungeons out there. Liz shot back, "Where did you hear that?" Lucia didn't waste a second. She instantly cut the conversation, insisting it was the very first time she'd ever held it. Gold coins. The protagonist snapped back to that moment when a guild worker had stepped up to him and kept congratulating him over and over as his promotion somehow reshaped the entire village. He turned his wealth into weapons and whipped the whole place into an army. That was pure legend. His alchemy didn't look anything like the usual kind, and when they questioned him, he just shrugged and said he'd been broke once, so he learned to squeeze every last bit of material. The girls told her, "Stay out of it." But the truth was, the promotion happened because he'd pushed things so hard they couldn't ignore it anymore. At least, that's what it looked like. Pushed the guild's strength up across the board, but they still rode off those 2 1-stars and those 3-star quests were way more dangerous. So for them, that was a level 10 jump ahead, so let him step in now and protect them in the present. Right now, the protagonist leaned in and wondered if they should just stick to 1-star quests for the time being. He figured they needed to learn how to work as one team first. Liz agreed, no hesitation. Agreed, and honestly, I said they'd just get in the way right now. She blurted out that everything was fine and swore they'd use that money to snap up technique books. These magical artifacts let you master techniques like a cheat code for power, just by reading them. That's exactly why these books are so wildly popular with adventurers. Yeah, these books cost a fortune, but once if they push harder, they'll slice through 3-star orders with zero stress and rake in bigger rewards, because this is a straight-up bet on what's coming next. Mild, and said this made perfect sense. Liz admitted she never thought she'd see this kind of practicality from her, and Lucia snapped, "Who do you think you are?" They tore through their food, and he dashed straight for the adventurers' market. Right then, village chief Rusha suddenly showed up nearby, and the moment the protagonist showed up, the sly smile hit, like, here he is. And yeah, this ungrateful brat doesn't even deserve it. We're living like kings. Then the locals started demanding answers, asking what they planned to do next. In fact, should they grab him right now? She asked, then admitted that even if they caught him, he won't listen to them anymore. Now they've got to manufacture the perfect situation. So he's the one pushing to submit himself, and talk about getting lucky. With two convenient fools sitting right beside him. Later, they rolled up to the adventurers' market, and the first shop they hit was right there. In the adventurers' shopping district, you could hunt for gear, stock up on consumables, and chase after rare magi until the marketplace swallowed you whole. Main Street struts with famous shops. Then you turn the corner, and the back alleys choke up with fences. Brokers run secret underground quests and dueling arenas. No adventurers guild, no rules, just non-stop danger. And it just keeps getting worse. The vibe here is way more dangerous than any regular market. Magna and the crew stormed into the Saskatch Magic Bookstore, and the clerk dropped the bomb. Dance of the Two Blades, and flowers, birds, wind, moon, plus 2 secret technique scrolls will cost you 2 million. G. Lucia stared at it with nerves screaming, spun around, and barked loud. He blared, "So you're seriously paying $2 million for this? Like, really?" With the million looming, Liz's nerves were shot. She grabbed the moment and warned him he shouldn't do it. "Be afraid, right now. This is a huge investment, isn't it?" She swallowed her fear, gathered her courage, and slid the bag of money onto the counter. She said she'd pay for it, and they all shrieked with excitement. Then he snatched the money and thanked them as they hurried off with their purchase. He jabbed a finger to the side and told them, "Go to the reading room next. Start the recording." Training would take roughly an hour, and their companion would be right there beside them. In the store, he paused, replayed it in his head, then waved at them like he'd finally made up his mind, and promised them, "I'll just take a stroll through the market for now." Now, later, they'd link up at the fountain, and she gave him a bright wave. He stared at him like he'd just seen a ghost, then said, "Catch you later." He rushed to the market and blurted out in pure shock, "There are so many magical items!" And potions there. Even when he ran errands, they wouldn't let him go to the... He headed to the adventurer's market, and his mind buzzed with one question: how much those magic potions really cost. A healing potion runs you around 100 grams. Then he stared in disbelief because that a healing potion will set you back 10,000 G, and the seller, with a messed up... He shot a dissatisfied look, insisting his price was still a steal, and then he spun back toward him. He swallowed his pride, apologized to him, and the seller immediately snapped back with, "And yeah, to be honest, it cost a fortune. Still, potions are exactly what poor newbie adventurers need most. But you can't just buy them with that kind of money." He said it plain as day, and yeah, because... With the war raging, potion prices shot through the roof. He let out a heavy sigh, nodded, and admitted, "Yeah, this is just an..." The Alchemist Association cooked up an excuse to jack up the price because they monopolized the production and sale of Overrun. They used quality control as a cover, poured out potions, and somehow that little scam turned them into untouchable millionaires while the protagonist is about. He inspected the potion and realized it wasn't just overpriced, it was also total trash. So they were selling it for that much money? He'd dreamed his whole life of joining the Alchemist Association, and he still couldn't stop thinking that crowd wasn't exactly his dream. But now the disappointment hit harder. Then the seller bowed, thanked them, and cut the moment with a grin as he headed into the next words. Lucia flashed a bright smile as she said it was the biggest purchase of her life, but her hands were still trembling. They burst outside, and with a bright, excited smile, she blurted that they had to hit the dungeon. ASAP. Time to test her new technique right now, because she felt like she could crush any monster that stood in her way. Liz trailed after her, warning her straight up, overconfidence never ends well. She grinned like the world was okay, saying everything was fine now that he was finally with them. She halted mid-step and demanded of her sister, "Can we seriously keep going like this? Like, after all that, they barely helped at all and still got the same as him. Then they even pulled off such an..." She turned to her and snapped, asking if she was really bringing that up again, because even he admitted everything just souped. "Fit for him," she said. "Sure," she agreed, but then warned that they'll only keep taking from him. "So tell me, can you even call that love?" Lucia suddenly broke the vibe with one sharp question, asking what it was she. She made her move, then marched right up to her and asked, "Want to kick him out?" She's done with them because they're not good enough anymore, and now she's desperate to go back to grinding one-star quests for a couple thousand G while gambling her life every single time? No money for even a single potion, and with the first real wound, she's doomed to die, fast. She pressed a hand to her face and told herself to stop wallowing. No way was she going back to that kind of life. She swallowed her pride, because choosing how to live is a luxury they can't even touch. Then, suddenly, an old man barreled up to them, screamed at the top of his lungs, and she darted straight to him, grabbing hold and demanding to know what happened. He gestured toward a shadowy alley, threw in a quick apology, and begged to be brought. She dragged herself into the shade, got what he meant, called Liz, and begged for help. They marched him into the alley, and she leaned in, demanding, "Are you okay? Maybe they should call a doctor." He shot them a small, grateful smile, and said that if he swallowed the medicine, everything would finally be okay. The potion hit, and his muscles shot up fast until he grinned, saying, "Just drink it, then my strength will come roaring back." He would snap back instantly, but now he finally had the strength to grab them with his own hands. Then, chaos hit, because everyone just stared in shock and blurted, "Who the hell is this old man?" And she whipped her head around and noticed 3 more old men marched up to them, and were about to strike, right when everything starts going down. MC sat by the fountain, staring into the water as dread crept in. Then he choked on the thought, "I didn't just mess this up." He crushed it shopping, and his real obsession, the fire dragon's claw, snagged it too. With it, you can brew a strength potion so much stronger than the one you used before, from ordinary grass. Then Matilda stormed up to him and called out. She called out his name and told him straight to his face that she'd been searching for him for ages. He snapped his head toward her, eyes wide with shock, and she blurted that he vanished so fast she could barely even breathe. Was already starting to worry. He should have gone back to the village, but he snapped back, refusing to leave, saying he knew that they were. They were secretly hawking his potions behind everyone's back. She told him not to come down so hard, yet she'd been hiding the village's mess from him, and she wasn't about to demand forgiveness for free. She'd toss out an apology like a peace offering, introduce him to 2 adorable brides, and he couldn't stop stressing over what he'd just heard. What she was even talking about, before she blurted out that the 2 young sisters were about to go on an adventurers, and man, they were exactly his kind. Something felt off, and he started to suspect it, right as she said with an evil grin, he looked straight up interested. So they should step back and talk everything through, calm and controlled. After that, she yanked him toward the forest, where the villagers had chained them up tight. Lucia and Liz were strapped in tight, chained to rough wooden posts, like captives with nowhere to run. The village headman flashed a grin and told him, "Now get back here." He headed back to the village to whip up the medicine all over again. Otherwise, she wouldn't stand up for the safety of these brides. He glanced at her with worry, then grabbed his gun and thought. He thought it was his problems that dragged them into all of this, but then the safety came first. But if he was going to be alone, he'd have to obey every word she said. Left on his own, he still hunted for an answer. Then he made his move and said it. He promised he'd come back to the village if they let him and his crew go, no questions asked. And everyone was shocked by the bargain. Liz blurted out loud and slammed the refusal. She insisted he didn't have to obey. Obey these freaks, or the old man would knock her hard across the face with his fist. He slammed a fist on the spot and roared at her to shut up. Then Lucia spoke. He reached for her with a worried look, and she snapped back, saying that she was okay, so he had to lock those thoughts out and stop spiraling over them. She bared her teeth at them and charged in to fight, then snapped, "You're all stupid!" He fumed and asked what she was babbling, and she snapped that she was calling her sister. She turned to her sister and admitted, straight from her own mouth, that she was the one who had said it. Said they'd never been allowed to choose how to live. And then, After everything they'd taken from him, they were still faced with that choice. They bolted the moment things turned dangerous, so how would they even be any different from these? These people just wanted to use him, and it hurt to the core. Real comrades fight side by side, no matter what. She weighed that truth in her mind. She hit her limit, gathered every ounce of courage, then shouted his name at the top of her lungs and said, she said she couldn't handle pain at all, so he had to rescue them fast. Magna snapped back. Grace had demanded he protect them, so he whipped out his pistol. He gripped his pistols and declared it was all crystal clear. Then it hit him. He'd been wrong. She caught it right away, tension spiking, and she snapped, loud enough to make everyone freeze, telling them to kill. Gun down one of them, he blasted his pistols, and even they couldn't believe it. He struck both of them in the stomach, and panic slammed into them as the villagers looked on in total confusion. He nodded like he owned the moment and declared, I'm out. Everyone else can handle the rest. They stared right at them, and then a surge of power hit, giving them the strength to pull it off, to smash those chains to pieces. Right after that, they unleash their secret techniques and slam into the enemy with a brutal attack. He blitzed through the villagers in a heartbeat and left them crushed in his wake, who were standing nearby, and Matilda couldn't stop worrying, and broke the silence, shouting that they'd been shot. He swore the bullets were forged with a fire dragon's claw inside. A magical material, so he took it, used their bodies as the base, and turned it into a power potion, right? Right inside them, she froze in shock and blurted, Wait, what? Did he really treat people like tools? He even bragged that his golden transformation won't be held back by whatever materials you start with. She knew it all too well, so she let herself start falling. She burst out laughing with a bright, wide grin and said, It's perfect for me, no doubt about it. This ridiculous gift should be mine. She refused to hand it over to a single soul, no matter what it cost her. Even if she had to tear his arms and legs off, she still wouldn't. She'd rip him back if she had to, because now she was about to prove the power of a body that had bounced back stronger than ever. The village chief lunged at him and screamed that she'd make him understand why people once feared her as a mountain witch. She was a 3-star adventurer, no dodging at all. The protagonist just snagged her blade mid-swing with one hand. He blurted in shock that he'd caught her punch with one hand somehow, despite the fact that she'd just downed 10 strength potions. He said her body looked like it had already been totally wrecked by those potions. It was a serious case, but he always ran his tests first, then, and only then, decided. He locked in the exact method, then refused to give a single dose until he was certain it was safe. Especially because his ingredients weren't even close to standard, which... Tell me, what materials were safe? How much of each did they use, and did anything nasty happen after? He even put all of it to the test on his own body, because she could tell just by how tormented he'd been by him. Every single day he pushed himself harder and harder as he grew, and the results? His physical abilities went absolutely unreal. The power hit like a tidal wave. Then the protagonist snapped her sword in half on the spot and declared she was done with them. If anyone ever died from his potions, he wouldn't sleep a wink, so he made sure to administer. She gave her first aid, and it was going to be brutal. He swung with a crushing hit, smashing the... He lunged with lightning speed, driving his punch straight into the torso, and it made the... The old woman forced herself to vomit onto the ground. She said, If I drain it all, my life stays safe. So who? All right, so who'd they hit with their help next? The villagers. The villagers started stammering that they'd stall things, and he fired back. When he left the village, he finally figured out something about. He's got a soft spot for people like Lucia and Liz, folks who don't back down and who are ready to fight. He fights for everyone else, and he absolutely seethes at the bastards who cash in on other people's kindness. So he's gonna smash them up, no debate, no excuses, and after a while, the protagonist. The paganist slammed every villager to the ground, then folded his arms and offered an apology. for the mess he'd caused. Liz threw up her hands and said he had nothing to apologize for. Lucia just smiled and said she'd been. He'd been terrified the moment he fired at them, and when they pushed back, he insisted he'd only wanted to. Liz didn't just test the waters, she poked the bear and ruined their whole plan before they could even secure everyone's safety. He might have called them comrades, but even so, a proud grin still spread across his face. He never saw them as his equals. That's why he kept dodging 3-star quests. But now he's stepping up and offering them. Lucia beamed with pure excitement and declared, "We're taking them on, and together we'll make it!" Hunting the grand jackpot then, later on, Klaus marched right into the Kremlin branch of the Alchemists Association. He barged into the professor's quarters and snapped that he'd come to report the incident. Then it all happens during the temporary exam, right when Professor Wiesmann had to know. And this wasn't just any guy, it was Professor Victor Wiesmann himself. After studying the plant inside the flask, he realized it was useless. No full restoration potion could be brewed from that broken raw material. Klaus couldn't make heads or tails of it at all, and that's exactly why he demanded to share his take. The professor broke it down like this. If you stripped every part from the healing leaf amount they handed out in the exam, Klaus blurted out that they could brew a full human-sized healing potion because every single ingredient carries magical resistance even. Even the most basic magical materials get battered. About 70% of their power gets wiped out by resistance. And the exam material was totally messed up, like someone set traps instead of questions. And if you could pull out everything from a stash like that, then those potions, or even weapons, could be forged from weeds and stones, endlessly. Rebuilding some random substance isn't alchemy, it's just the same old act of age. A god sweeping in, shaping man from dust. Victor even noticed that this examinee had actually pulled it off, and from his report, one truth hit him hard. He'd done it himself. He personally failed an alchemist, ranked like a deity. Wow. Honestly, that answer was shockingly spot on. Their stuff costs a fortune because it's actually worth something, and it's so rare you can practically count the chances. If potions could be brewed even from weeds, then the market would crash, crushing their reputation with it. So yeah. So you're telling me a god like that exists among the alchemists, right there in their world? This is a no-go, so he needs to reach out to the Shadow right now and call the witch to come running. After a while, the Adventurers Guild buzz turned ugly. People started muttering, like something was about to explode. Have you heard of the cat's paw? Are you the ones who leapt from one trap like a start and never stopped? They were stuck at just 3, and it still took them a full 10 years to claw their way up to 2 stars. They're saying a brand new monster alchemist just joined the fight. But how in the world is someone like that supposed to help out on the battlefield? Yeah, sounds impossible. Yeah, grabbing potions for almost nothing is super convenient, but the magical materials they're made from are brutally expensive. People whisper that this alchemist can turn literally anything into a real material, like the time he made a raster out of thin air. The restoration potion pulled victory out of weeds, and in a blink, it armed the whole village, turning the people into a full-on army. Just then, the whole team slipped back to the guild. Lucia's face fell as she blurted that there weren't any treasures inside. And right after that, the protagonist. Daganis shot back a smile like the upper levels were already wiped clean, and Liz went, "Thanks to those technique books." They fought their way through the dungeon monsters, and Lucia pushed for next time. Let's buy some gear and go deeper. But she shut it down fast. They didn't have the money. MC admitted that with a heavy load, every step felt like dragging chains. Plus, with no extra people, roles were impossible to pass around, and staying put for too long was straight-up dangerous. Risky! Lucia blurted that they'd hire people, and Liz snapped back that they couldn't afford it right then, at that moment. Percival, the Red Hound's fearless leader, strode up to the protagonist and demanded, "So you're the newcomer, Magna?" Even those guys heard about his exploits. Apparently, he'd gotten all the way to a 4-star crew. How about that? The Red Hounds were finally ready to accept. They slam the door open and welcome him into their leadership on the spot. Then Lyrica, the leader of the trio, goes first. 3-star Black Willigild materialized out of nowhere and barked, "Don't you dare try to lure." She yanked him away in front of her, because sending him to those guys was way smarter than leaving him stuck with those hounds. There's a whole crowd of girls in that group, and yeah, he's seriously handsome too, but if he shows up right now, she'll slip him a special. Lucia erupted in fury. "What nerve is this? They're poaching someone right in front of me, the leader?" And like hell she was letting it slide. Percival said their strength just can't stack up to his. And if someone truly capable gets trapped where they can't show what they're made of, that's a straight-up loss for society. Lyrica nodded along and pushed the idea further, telling him they couldn't stop now, they had to keep going. They kept grinding their 1-star part-time gigs, at least for now, and the protagonist. The colonists kept their cool and told him, "I get you," like they were finally speaking the same language. Then he threw himself into the life of an adventurer because he wanted to help people. And yeah, it looks like he might have been about to. They'd never had more chances to shine in a famous group, but these two still threw themselves into danger without a second thought, even when the danger was right on the edge, right. In battles where they couldn't even offer a single shred of value, he still refuses to back down and pushes to team up with them. With them, he's damn proud to be part of the Cat's Paw group. Then Lucia lunges in and Lyrica started blurting out how much she loved him, and he nervously interrupted. "Wait, is it all about—" "It's all about youth. Do the men really need to sacrifice young lives? And does she have to get pulled into it too?" Percival stared at her and said, "Yeah, you've got history, but you're still young." Magna must have hit the jackpot finding comrades who actually had his back. But man, what a loss. Because at that exact moment, he could have been crushing it in the vanguard for the great expedition coming next. Victor burst into the guild and with effortless grace apologized right away for the... He crashed the meeting, demanded a Cat's Paw crew, and said he needed them to go in, so first, let him apologize. He begged to be forgiven after they labeled him a failure thanks to a messed-up selection process that dragged on all this time. This mess happened because he failed to keep a close eye as a leader. Victor marched up to the protagonist, threw his head down in a deep bow, and blurting out, "I'm so sorry." Let him lift his head. Now it doesn't matter to him at all. Lucia blurted, "Do you have a task for me?" The professor nodded, and then called out that the Cat's Paw group would join the 38th Great Expedition, set to happen next. Next week, Klaus is going to break it all down for you, and yeah, he already started explaining. They claim the Great Expedition is a massive dungeon hunting showdown on a whole different scale, run by the Alchemists Association, because beneath this continent, the underground is still far from being fully explored. This time, we're not just poking around. Our target is a zone plunging about 800 meters down. On the day the expedition kicks off, even the tiniest 1-star guilds will be thrown into action for the brutal reshuffling of humanity under the With the command of the 4-star Red Hounds, around 200 adventurers, workers, and association members will be pulled in, making sure. During route security, they slammed a base camp into place, hauled the supplies, guarded the association's members, and pulled off a clean extraction of They've got underground resources, but the job they're handing the Cat's Paw is clear. Escort the exploration team all the way down to 1,000 meters. Out past the map, there's a real shot at striking untouched Ethereum caches and digging up ancient artifacts. Just don't forget, it's deadly out there. Of course, this work pushes humanity forward, and he tells them to help. Lucia smirks, thinking there's gotta be a reward in it, right? Victor snaps that his explanations always drag on and bore everyone to death. So let's see what the young lady does. Simple as that, the Alchemist. They pay every last expense, hook up all the supplies, and even the Cat's Paw gets the bill covered. He's got to hunt for treasure, and they'll shell out big time for every valuable thing he digs up. Lucia snapped, "Let them hash it out on their own for a bit, then we'll see." She strode up to the others and challenged them. That offer sounds insanely profitable. Or am I just imagining it? The protagonist shot back that the offer was absolutely perfect. because what they couldn't pull off, the three of them alone, was... Liz said it wouldn't have been possible without the massive expedition backing them. Then she leaned in and pointed out they had. He'd already gotten burned by an offer that was way too good to be real, so the protagonist snapped back. He couldn't believe an organization like the Alchemist Association, with a name that feared nothing, would dare to send fake orders to the Adventurers Guild, because he truly believed they had to accept. Then Luciac starts. They blurted out that they agreed. Victor's grin shot across his face as he said, "Then..." Percival snapped. "Sign the contract right now." He said that he and Lyrica wouldn't just follow, they'd march right at the front, leading the charge. It was a huge relief they'd agreed to help, because a week later, the expedition, more than 200 warriors, plus the cat's paw, charged down into the dungeon. After he carved the quickest, safest path through the labyrinth city, they pushed into the city, down as deep as 300 meters, until they finally hit the forward base, right inside the heart of it. In the ruins of Didi, the one-star groups would sprint back and forth, hauling supplies through the wreckage like it was a lifeline. The surface and the camp, while the main force, 3 stars and up, moves forward after. They refilled their supplies and dove straight into the great underwater thicket, where the whole nightmare starts around 400 meters down. With ferocious monsters clawing at them, they kept charging forward, refusing to stop. 10 days after stepping into the dungeon, he plunged deeper. They tore through the dungeon and then burst into the dragon graveyard. A yard plunges down to a depth of roughly 800 meters. Then boom, a colossal bridge made of dragon bone tore open ahead of them, stretching into the dark like a nightmare made real. Lucia blurts out, all excited and worried. "Wait, is this bridge really safe?" "It's not even a bridge, just scattered bones." He shot back that those were dragon bones. "Were tougher than any stone bridge." Asked whether dragons could really get that massive. He told me, back then it sounded impossible. But they swear there was a time, millions of years ago, when dragons ruled the world. Maybe this was the surface of the earth back then. Then, just like that, they crossed the bridge and Lucia felt... She slammed to the ground, breathing a laugh like, "I finally feel solid ground under my feet again." And Lyrica glanced around with a grin and clocked the glowing moss they'd dragged here, lighting everything up. On that last expedition, things finally started going right, somehow. Even underground, everything was working out perfectly. Percival made it clear, this was where their base camp would be, so they should kick off right away, laying the groundwork for the wild adventures ahead. Stave off the danger and stand watch around the whole camp while they rushed to build it. They better keep their eyes up for strikes from above. Then they'd swing back to the advance party, take a quick breather, and push through that cave right in the dragons. He plunged his mouth and head straight toward the abyss's towering waterfall, dropping 928 meters down into the dark. Years dragged by, and this was the edge of what humanity could handle. Step past it, and you're staring into total unknown, so they'd better get ready. Next, the Cat's Paw crew closed in on the entrance. Klaus demanded where the witch was, and when he answered, it set everything in. And she had already made it to the great waterfall. As they burst through the entrance, a storm of ferocious dragons erupted from the sky, circling them like death itself had arrived. With that, the whole vanguard surged into battle and slammed into the monster head-on. MC leaned on his skills and powered through. Z started unloading shots at the enemies, but the burst cut off before he pierced through them, and he blurted out that he drove the blade straight through them. He slammed his hand down on the gold. The golden alchemy power snapped into action and obliterated them on the spot. Then the monster showed up, and Percival's surprise hit like a punch to the gut. He didn't just rise to the occasion, he even figured out how to turn the enemy's power against them. He turned his body into the material right then. Lucia snapped, "Stop yapping and help us right now!" The group leader leaned in and pointed out that Liz's skill book had one of those killer skills inside. A sneaky skill that laughed in the face of the enemy's defense. Then the girl started weighing whether to use her fighting spirit roared, no need for her fists. She unleashed the purple palm skill, and with it she forged a crushing blast of magic energy. Lyrica snapped, calling out to Lucia and saying she was wound up too tight, like her nerves were about to snap. With this skill, she swung with enough power to cleave clean through armor. She went all in, attacking with every inch of herself. Then she finally gave in. She lunged straight into battle, thinking that one single blow could end it all. Her blade only barely managed to break into the armor. She reined in a few more crushing hits. Then she hesitated, caught between going for one last strike or stopping right there. He drove the blades in and flooded them with power the instant they struck. Lucia unleashed the dance of double blades. With cross skills blazing, he swung once, and the monster's head flew clean off instantly. Percival grinned and said they'd struck gold with that buy. Those skill books were so good, even 5-star groups were using them. Lyrica admitted the only catch was the insane price. But they should totally forgive her, even if it means letting her off the hook for what she's about to. They once saw them as a burden, but the truth was way different. Those were top-tier adventurers who already. She knew the exact way to prep right, and she was counting on them to nail it right then. At that exact moment, Klaus blurted out, "The depth is 900 meters." And that endless abyss was already right on their heels. Underground waters crashed together into a single unstoppable point, and then it roared to life as a monstrous waterfall, and the whole scene was straight up unreal. Later on, at Kremlin headquarters, the room erupted. Something huge was about to happen. Grace leaned over a magical artifact called Thought Transmission and told everyone they were holding their breath, waiting for the next report. Right then, Tosh hurried up to her and told her he'd been handing out the new guild member cards for the entire past month. Grace blurted out, beaming, "It finally happened!" And he shot her a confused, "So, what are you feeling right now?" She leaned in and said, "There's a huge new challenger here, someone who landed a 3-star and rocked the whole place." Star Criminal launches on his very first mission. No backing out, no second chances. Tosh leaned in and said, "On my way here, I caught something in the distance. Something feels off at the port." And then the liaison ship Milva pulls in. The moment he arrived, a deadly ambush hit. People said he'd been attacked right there. On its last voyage, Grace got ambushed by a kraken, and pure wild shock tore through it. Shock burst out. He couldn't believe it. That 5-star threat-level magical beast, and even the man nodded in agreement. "Yeah, exactly," they nodded, then warned that those sailors wouldn't stand a chance handling something like that. Such a terrifying enemy, but somehow the ship still slammed into port, safe and when. When he grilled the sailors about what miracle spared them, they swore a towering witch had sailed with them, then blasted the crack to ashes with raw fire magic. Shit. She gasped that it was the very same witch who had just incinerated that fireproof aquatic monster. Could it really be her? Tosh muttered that maybe one of the world's 7 5-star criminals had just shown up right then. At last, the Cat's Paw crew burst into the scene right at the Abyss Falls. The MC stared, feeling the heat spike. Then, like clockwork, the exact same witch melt burst right back into existence. She burst in, unleashed her red calamity, and drove the attack home with terrifying force. Magna landed a brutal hit, but he still didn't have the experience to stand up to real killing intent. And just like that, the exact moment Percival's reaction stalled, the fast one, who was coming in, hit him with it. So he snapped into action and fired off the heavy knight move, Guardian Ages. This blasts your defense up 100-fold and leaves a bearish vibe hanging in the air. He threw up a barrier to shield his allies, only for that same shield to start failing. And then the sacred heat hits, scorching everything inside her, until right at that exact moment, Lyrica surged forward and snatched the moment, catching the attack dead on. Percival's relentless dedication carved out a gap using. With blazing sword skill and divine speed, she swept her blade across the witch's neck. That blade, meant to split her head clean off, bit into nothing at all. In a fight between fighters this deadly, that one mistake sealed everything, like it was over the moment it happened. A devastating punch slammed into Lyrica's face, dropping her like a switch, knocked out cold in an instant. And just like that, everything exploded in only 3 heart-stopping seconds after the collision. Facing Melt, the red disaster, the protagonist's nerves started to crack under the pressure. Hard. He couldn't stop worrying that he'd blown it, because that hesitation felt like a fatal mistake. They hesitated for 1 second, and that's when it hit. They could have both died. "No self-punishment," he snapped, then started firing. He opened fire on her, but every single shot missed its mark. The girl blurts, "So you're Magna, right?" And Lucia jumps in, shouting back, "Yeah!" Slapped by wild shock, he realizes he knows her. MC can't help but wonder, does he even know her? How is she supposed to know his name, Mel? Melt grinned like a maniac and said it would be. It'd be disastrous if she got it wrong. The teacher flat out declared that Magna was a truly vile monster of a person. Their alchemy was wrecking lives everywhere, so she decided she had no choice. She had to kill them. The teacher was depending on her, and she wasn't about to let that trust slip, because she wanted to be chosen, wanted to matter. She needed to be wanted, because if she wasn't, she couldn't even exist in this world. So she chose to make sure he needed her. Let him die. Then the witch unleashed divine magic. The protagonists couldn't help but sweat with worry as they stared at the Prometheus skill, praying it wouldn't go wrong. Wondered if he even got a single word of what she was talking about. She kept talking, but at least she got to the part about her. Now her goal was crystal clear, and he started hurling potions to his owl like it was game time. The allies grinned and swore they just pulled out full healing potions. Let them handle those two. Then he'll step in and pull everyone's attention off them. MC charged in to take her down, but she slipped away, leaving him scrambling to track that psychopath. He fired again and again, but every single shot crashed to nothing. Futile! And right after that, he slammed into motion, about to make the next move. To tear massive spikes up out of the ground, this attack. This attack fizzled for a brief second, then the chance slipped away. Magna couldn't help but wonder if he truly got it. They get completely overlooked. Because they don't actually land a hit, the monsters. Heat warps the air around her. Then what they see hits like a punch. What they see is. It's a fake image while this magic is running. Their attack simply can't land on the real target. That means he has to switch tactics right now, stay disciplined, slash his attacks down to a minimum, and just focus on dodging every single hit. Keeping magic this powerful on non-stop demand would guzzle a massive amount of mana, and if he really breaks it down, he'd see why. He can feel it. Her mana is draining at breakneck speed, and he knows it'll only last for. Give it 3 minutes. If he holds back and then strikes back, he can beat her, and he'll grin like he's already won. He said it was like everyone's mind synced up, and then, out of nowhere, the MC dropped hard to his knees. She said that Prometheus's skill doesn't just absorb. It's only magic, and yet it's still chewing through his oxygen. Was that really what he thought? Do you really think those flames didn't devour the oxygen right out of his reach? The witch grinned at him, unleashed the apocalypse skill, and tore loose a jaw-dropping, earth-shaking blast of fire erupted like a meteor. Pure, unstoppable power. The Dagonists harnessed golden alchemy and forged a massive wall to guard it. He braced himself. Then it hit him. Making just a wall wasn't going to save him. This heat would burn him alive, and he knew it. He had to twist the whole structure right down to the feathers. Winter Sparrow's feathers pinned the air in place, and he'd build a wall like that, brick by breath, just to trap you out. Like a honeycomb, trapping air inside until the insulation melts. Melt, cackling like a maniac, blurted that it was totally useless. Then she cut herself off as her. He snapped his apocalypse skill back into action and blasted a roaring, fiery projectile straight ahead. The protagonist froze in shock, staring at her own magic fire like, Why am I even doing this? Non-stop, right after that insane, heart-crushing power hits, the purge hit, and in the aftermath, there was nothing left standing where it struck. The projectile's path cut through the air, and Melt, sighing like it hurt, smiled anyway and asked, "Has she ever actually helped her teacher even once?" Seeing what happened, Lucia froze in pure horror. She crumpled to her knees and snapped that it couldn't be. Out of nowhere, he blasted her right in the stomach, and still managed to land a hit that hurt her, so yeah, things were getting real fast. Grinning like crazy, they melted hard, serious heat and all. He demanded to know why he was still alive. He said alchemy can't conjure something out of nothing. Something out of nothing. This is the wild art of reshaping matter's very structure. So he yanked the wall's material straight from the ground right beneath his feet. Feet. Golden alchemy wasn't for fire protection at all. She used it to dig a hole, and then she dropped hard, falling to... She hit the ground and snapped that she'd gotten too relaxed. Then Lucia and Liz sprinted up, ran up to him, beaming, and spilled that they were absolutely terrified. He asked, "So what about those two?" And the moment they came up to them, they blurted, "Thanks to you, we..." They somehow lived through it, somehow got fully healed, yet the treatment's overload nearly wrecked them. She just finished the treatment. Now her stomach twists and she's about to vomit, because she's using divine magic the way she always does. Most people barely survive her, because she's the red disaster melt, one of the 7 5-star criminals, and she's only ever cast when 10 people are ready for impact. Sure enough, at world-level status, he didn't just stand a chance, he smashed her and won. Magna flashed a grin and said it was because they both landed that first hit. Larica couldn't even meet his eyes. He vanished, and I'm like, why the hell would that idiot chase him in the first place, even after all that? She mulled it over and finally said, "She told me she's only doing this on a teacher's orders." And then she was right about to say the rest before everything cut off. Lucia cut in mid-moment, called him over, and asked if he had someone out there who might be harboring hate for him. He recalled Matilda and said she was real, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was no way she'd be tied to a monster of a magic user like that. Someone rolled up to them and said, "Good thing you decided to check, because that choice changes everything." She had to check the situation herself, just in case, so she wouldn't slip up and fail. It all fell apart. Everyone snapped their eyes to him, and she burst into tears. Tears streaming, he called the teacher and was right on the edge of. To make his point, he yanked off his hat, hurled it at the ground, and told her he believed in her with everything. Then she crushed those hopes. She pointed at him. Then her face tightened with fear as she obsessed over every word she'd just heard, unable to calm down, and erupted in a scream that ripped through the air. Professor Wiseman demanded an explanation, and they had no idea what any of this was supposed to mean. Lyrica leaned in and demanded to know if he'd unleashed it yet. The red disaster. He nodded with a calm, unshaken face. He clenched his words and said it was the only way to wipe out the threat hanging over alchemy's future. The Alchemists Association was still there, but it looked like he'd totally misjudged him. His alchemy isn't magic. It's a relentless reshaping of matter's very structure, something anyone can access. It's a skill that any alchemist would envy, surgical in accuracy, blazing in efficiency. Yet somehow it's all they get, and that's what makes it feel so painfully pathetic. He doesn't rewrite the world's rules, and he can't conjure things out of nothing. He's not even close to a god. Even so, that's still a danger to the association, so the only move left is simple. Wipe him out. With a furious look on her face, she snapped, "Shut up!" and practically shouted it. She sprang up, launched herself high into the air, and yanked it out, right when everything was about to explode. She yanked out a whole stack of knives and flung them straight at him. He'll fire off the shadow binding skill and lock them down. She crumpled straight into his shadow, and panic slammed his body so hard he couldn't move an inch. He slammed his voice into the air, shouting his name like it was an emergency. The protagonist yanked out a gun, and dread hit him. his thoughts already spiraling into, I can't. But he still couldn't wrap his head around why that association had picked him in the first place. Like they knew something he didn't. Enemy, and what they were going for. Then he realized he was out of time because he was no longer able to stop it. No way I'm going to flinch anymore just because someone else is throwing malice my way. Drive the strike straight into his head, then unleash the golden alchemy like it's the last card you've got. Decomposition hit, and they all thought he was done for. He'd already won. Then, out of nowhere, his head started to regrow and he claimed alchemy isn't just magic, it's a science that reaches straight for divinity. They're digging into it, and he steps up like, let me reintroduce myself, please. He's Victor Wiseman, an alchemist who's climbed all the way to the very top of the cold, clinical twist of living alchemy, where they obsess over blood and the science of what it can do, ends right there. And the flesh rewrote itself, like biology hitting the fast-forward button as he used biological rewriting. And his hand turned into a scorpion stinger, snapping out where his palm used to be. He stared in shock at what he saw, and the question hit him hard. Was he rewriting his own story? Percival used alchemy to rip apart the very structure of living beings and stood there, right in front of it. He slammed on the Guardian Aegis skill and threw up a barrier right in front of him. Around them then his strike got yanked off course and redirected. He spun back, staring at them, and wondered, wasn't that supposed to be his target? Pierced through, and he lifted her clean off the ground with a sudden. And in total shock, Liz blurted, so did he! Did he turn on his own ally? She was in. Ruthless pain crushed him, yet he still smirked as he pushed it to the limit and used. He fired off his forced activation skill and basically told everyone, at the very least, let this be the last time, make yourself useful. She blacked out from the power of this skill, and when she came to, she triggered the end of the world. Skill. MC's stomach dropped, panic flooding in, because this time the attack didn't look like it would hold. This force refuses to obey, and when it explodes outward in every direction, he can only roar as it hits. With a shaky voice and a worried glare, they blurted out that everyone had to. They leapt down, and with a thunderous explosion roaring past them, somehow they all managed to. Right before impact, he sprang off the cliff, and the world dropped out from under them. They stumbled back, staring in shock. What kind of power is this? They barely made it out, and it's definitely not some automatic guarantee that they were truly saved. They jolted with raw emotion, because from a height like that, they were about to get hurt for sure. Lucia snapped her head up and shouted at him right before they plunged to their deaths. He asked what they were doing next, and she clocked it. Melt's hand was clenched in his. He blared at them, demanding to know why he'd dragged her along too. He warned that if he abandoned her there, death would have taken her for good. Liz whipped her head around, eyes wide with shock, and blurted, "Wait, has the waterfall vanished?" Larica said the height gap here was just too massive, and the water instantly turned into fog. Percival stared at the device and declared, "We've got." They tore past the 2,000-meter mark, only 100 meters into the plunge from the Great Abyss waterfall. But the bottom still vanished into darkness. Lucia, eyes wide with fear, shouted loudly. Magna cut in fast, saying, "No time to stare right now. Move already!" Everything was fine. Then a wild idea hit him, and he realized he'd need her help to pull it off. Help! She jolted at what she saw, her eyes widening as He blurted out in shock, shouting, "What on earth is he talking about?" Because yeah, she was the enemy. He told her the truth. She'd been left behind, and now she had nothing to chase anymore. Hunt him. He had no time, and he knew he'd need her help. Then he promised her the last potion of complete healing. Once she's back on her feet, she'll slam into him with every ounce of power she has. She fired the exact same magic she used to attack him, and it slammed straight into the abyss below. They stared at him and blared, "Are you even right in the head? Are you really going to forgive the one who tried to kill him?" That's insane! Too dangerous! Melt. She stared at him, stunned, and blurted, "Wait, does he actually need you? Does he seriously lean on you that hard?" He grinned, nodded, and said only he could pull it off. No one else had a shot. She took a big sip of the potion, grinned like she meant it, and told him he could. She could count on her. Divine magic poured out of her like a blessing. Magic skill apocalypse. Then he demanded it, and the attack erupted. Sent a brutal beam crashing down, and worry flickered across his face. What if the water turned to fog and vanished? Even after it dissipated, the water kept crawling down the walls. So much of it had piled up that it was basically everywhere. Down at the bottom, if he shoved a monstrous blast of heat into it, a steam explosion ripped the air. Then everything unfolded exactly the way he had planned. Percival shouted at the top of his lungs, telling him to use the shield. To ride the air currents, he understood it instantly and used them. Guardian Aegis, maximum deployment, right there, in that exact moment. Steam blasted into the magic shield, and Lucia, his eyes went wide as he blurted, "The fall stopped!" Lyrica shot back, "Did you trigger the blast?" The last wave crashed from below as Lift sprinted straight for the cave, shutting the distance in one breath, right as he slammed the wall with his fist and bellowed, "Scram! Get into the side passage, right now!" They slammed their way to the wall together, and right as they made it, he demanded answers. Are they all safe? They swore it looked like they'd made it somehow. They survived. Percival stared at the device and said, "It..." So yeah, this proves the impossible can still happen. Even now, they're diving at a depth of 4,306. 60 meters. That's over 4 times deeper than the deepest point humanity has ever reached. If you're thinking they'll finally be forced to leave now, goosebumps will crawl up your spine. Lyrica admitted that something new terrifies her now, because the truth is, she's finally been healed, and that everything's fine feeling only makes it scarier. Sure, but 5-star criminals can't be trusted. Liz said that's exactly why she tried to kill him. He nodded, then leaned in and said they had to talk, right then, about what to do with her. Melt shot a question. Was I bothering you? And she only realized it after what they'd just been through. Whatever she'd done to them didn't matter anymore, because now she was about to die. Everyone froze in shock. She was seconds from plunging down. He yanked himself down, blared at her to stop, then sprinted straight to her side. He snatched her hand, and before she could pull away, everyone else lunged in and grabbed her too. She demanded him to stop, but her own mind was still racing in confusion. And he thought, I did it again. I saved her. Then he yanked her up, helping her get back on her feet, and thundered, asking what she was doing. Then she stared back like she didn't know what came next. She flashed a shy smile, admitted she felt totally out of place, and then made her move. Before she could even finish, he blasted out loud that she was taking. She couldn't brush off her own life like it was nothing. She had to start valuing herself. And when she stared at him, confusion twisted her face. Rage flared in his chest as he wondered, was he really worried about her? Then he whipped around and said it made sense why everyone was. Wary of her, they had no idea that right now they were diving into depths humanity had never even dared to touch. And they still don't know. Percival knows what kind of dangers are waiting in the shadows, so he figures more firepower can't hurt. Plus, he wants them to cooperate until they make it back to the surface. With a grave look on his face, he nodded. Lyrica. He couldn't believe it, and he admitted that even down here, nobody knew if there was any way out. If they had to blast their way through that rock, her firepower would come in clutch. Lucia said she felt it'd be way better if they teamed up, if she just promised she wouldn't pull any stunts. To act up again, she scratched the back of her head, greed roaring inside her, and started to say, they need to keep a sharp watch on her from here, and Melt is moving in. Closed the distance to him, cheeks warm with embarrassment, and blurted out that she'd asked. They demanded he stop the formalities and just call her by her name. She was honestly grateful he trusted her so much. until he cut himself off and said, "I agree with a C." With a confused look on her face, she smiled and asked if, when she got in the way, he could just tell her to die any time. "Anytime, okay? Wait, you hear me?" He got even more confused and snapped that nobody says things like that. Civil said that now that they'd locked in the plan, they needed to pull over, take a breather, and refill the night vision potion's effects. Larica nodded in agreement, but this place was packed to the brim. There was no way to eat properly here. The scene kept stretching on, like it was begging for a decision. "We've got to go there," MC muttered, then snapped his gaze around like he was hunting answers. He spotted the bricks and shot back. "Tell me, are the ruins still here even now?" Lucia beamed with pure joy and blurted out that was a huge clue. This place could still be hiding ancient artifacts that no one's found yet. Still hasn't been found, so they've got to go check themselves. Klaus marched up to the cliff's edge, leaned over the abyss, and stared down. He leaned in and said it was monstrously powerful. Just like everyone expected from the Red Disaster's magic, that level was the stuff of nightmares, rumored to be higher than 80. "If that guy dies, the Alchemist Association's power won't budge," Victor said. "Even if they manage to leap at the very last second, the great abyss below drops at least 3,000 meters deep." "Out there? You can't survive," the professor barked, then kept talking like it was already too late. "And I told you that." By now, the camp folks had to realize they were missing, because if that advance party doesn't come back, they'll suspect you. So how do you stop that? He stayed cool and said the plan was already set in motion. Consumed by an uncontrollable hunger for research, the client joined the advanced crew and barely escaped getting taken down by the monk. Monsters closed in, and the party fought them off with their last breaths, dying like heroes just to protect him. Doesn't that hit you right in the heart? He swore a cat's paw would be fine, but every one of them was already dead, so who, for real, was going to take that word? For the death of the leaders from the other groups, Victor flashed a grin and said bringing back a body part was the real proof. Klaus just stared down and said the proof would do it, because even now those bodies had already slipped into the abyss. He twisted his own hand, rewriting it like biology on demand, and with. Then he flashed a chilling grin and insisted the answer was right there in front of him. He sank a blade-deep sting into himself, and his body began to burst into rapid change, like something impossible just switched on in front of his eyes. He looked like a completely different person. And he couldn't wait. He wanted to grab the professor and ask him something. He said, with zero hesitation, that the quality was absolutely excellent. Nobody would ever spot the lie. Then he twisted his hand into the fake so perfectly, it fooled everyone. He formed his hand into a claw, pressed it to his neck, and snapped. One head is all the proof I need. Right then, inside the meeting hall, people shouted questions at the top of their lungs. The advance team's not sending any regular reports, and the customers already fed up. Also vanished? What the hell is happening? The guy muttered it looked like. Something's gone terribly wrong. He stares at her and blurts, "What's wrong? What's wrong with her? Why is she just standing there with that blank, dazed stare when this is the exact worst time to be distracted?" Grace spun toward him, face twisted with confusion, and begged him for forgiveness. "Hey, she said Tosh wanted to ask you something. In a 5-star group, what level are the adventurers? Like, roughly?" He mused that the range existed, but the leaders were hovering around level 70, so why in the world was she asking that right now? She told him Magna was no ordinary alchemist, like she'd been trying to say something even bigger, just before the words faded out. She stared at his card, stunned, because it wasn't just a 4-star. It was a full-on 5-star. And he thought he was only level 7. But then what about his job? And who is he really at the end of that? Right as it all came down, they slammed into a dead end, spun around, and Lyrica. Marika swore the passage was sealed by a collapse, but after that, nothing but a massive hollow void. Lucia shouted, "Melt!" and told her she could blow it up with that magic, just like before. Then she let out a confused laugh, smiled anyway, and apologized. She claimed that after the last time, her mana was totally gone, and she couldn't believe it herself as she blurted it out. She said through gritted teeth that her mana draw was absolutely horrific. Then she practically braced herself, appalled by what she was feeling. She dropped her head, apologized for bothering everyone again, and whispered that she was useless now, like they could just kill her. She snaps, blaring that she's moving on way too fast, and the protagonist yells for her to wait, right as he starts using her. He used golden alchemy and summoned 30 supreme men up from nothing. Potions. Then he thrust it into her hands and told her it looked like it had to be 3. 3 bottles would refill her mana just fine, so she stashed the rest right away. With those in reserve, she could pull them out the moment she needed them. She gulped the potion, unleashed her magic, and tore. Amid the rubble, he snapped, "You did great." And Lucia looked around like she could feel the emptiness inside her chest. He blurted, "So, will they push even farther?" Percival told him to hear him out and admitted he honestly didn't get what he meant. Alchemy? Wait, aren't those mana restoration items crafted from the stuff pulled from Wait, aetherite? That insanely rare, expensive magical mineral? Did he seriously just use it? If that's true, the Red Hounds will swoop in and pay every last expense. He nodded with a sly little grin and said, "Broke adventurers just can't swing gear like that, especially since an aetherite is crystallized magic energy pulled straight out of the air. So ether is already hanging in the air, and mana keeps coming back over time because they sip in the ether through their breath, so they don't even need aetherite. Just condense mana from the aetherite instead." He twisted the air itself into something the body could actually take in. Then, with alchemy, he brewed those exact potions. They cost less than 1G, so what's there to worry about? He looked totally lost and blurted out, "Isn't it pricey, right? Because it's so easy to get your hands on? Like, come on." MC's confidence alone is screaming, "Looks good!" Confused, he muttered, "Yeah, maybe that's true." But the moment he stepped into the city, he got hit with whiplash like, wait, they made it to? They got so lost chasing money and lounging on their privileges that they finally stopped. Training hard, yeah, but even back then he'd never trusted that association. And now that they were trying to kill him, he was going to make them regret it the moment he got the chance. Right. Ripping back to the surface, he couldn't help but blink in surprise. Like, did they really stop training right? Could that really be all it took? Mana is basically war power. How much mana? That's the brutal truth. What a state can weaponize decides who wins. And that's why aetherite is pure strategy. Even more important than gunpowder, yet it can endlessly churn out, not only healing potions, except it crushes even mana. If there's a power that flips the world's rules on its head, and it starts to, once word hits the world, every nation will crash into war just to get it. So they pushed on, burst out of the cave, and demanded answers about what the heck was that? Were those ancient ruins for real? In the ruins, Magna scanned the wreckage and then spotted bustling, modern cities stretching out beyond. He stared at the city and blurted, "What is this place?" And Percival shot back that the depth was It stretched out to around 3,000 meters, and he couldn't wrap his head around it. Man-made buildings, right there. Larica said, "So there are humans here." And the whole place suddenly made sense. Wasn't it already there long before the Age of Dragons even began? Liz crumpled to her knees, her face frozen in pure shock. Blurted out in shock, panted hard, and stared in disbelief, like he couldn't even finish the sentence. Fright hit her hard. Lucia rushed up, called her out, and anxiously demanded, "What's going on?" She looked exhausted, tripped mid-step, caught herself in a hug, apologized, and then asked if they could. He finally got a moment to catch his breath, and the protagonist promised, "I'll scout the area and make sure it's safe while you rest." Percival nodded and promised he'd stick with them, and Lyrica snapped, "I'm going with you." She'd already. Keep Melt's skills with the girls for now. After that, we'll see what happens next. After that, the two of them hit the street together, and she said it still felt wild, like after tens of billions, she never expected to lay eyes on a place like this. For years, this place stayed locked in time. Heck, even skeletons looked like they were still waiting, and then he said that. Maybe, just maybe, this very place used to be packed with whole deposits of aetheryte. He'd heard it guarded things even better than amber, so powerful that even bodies don't get ruined. Then the remains didn't just break down, those deposits vanished, and the ancient ruins inside have stayed there ever since. She got it instantly, then added, like it was nothing, that she'd heard wild rumors. An ancient man had once been brought back to life from an aetheryte deposit. She flashed a smile and basically told him, "Yeah, this already smells fishy." Then she started to. She threw her arms wide and declared that everything they were staring at wasn't some fairy tale at all. This was the real discovery. As the century turned, they had one mission, to climb back up with something for the people above, because they couldn't show up empty-handed. He nodded and promised that on their recon run, they'd hunt for artifacts too. If there was an aetheryte deposit here, then the mana in it would have lured in terrifying monsters, drawn like prey to a feast. Could have flocked in here, so she needs to stay close and not wander off. And yeah, she agreed too. After a while, the MC climbed up onto a tank right in the middle of the street and declared that he'd checked everything. Everywhere he looked, he searched for something, but all he found were these weird, strangely shaped structures looming in the distance. And most of them were aimless to the core, so we couldn't stop thinking. I figured maybe, just maybe, I could finally make sense of a few things. Like this. Take this. There was a cannon right there. And just looking at how it was built, you could tell. When the structure was laid bare, it screamed more advanced than anything around it. The dance-like form of the weapon we now call a cannon, these are the cartridges. They don't look anything like a cartridge for. His weapon hangs there. Look closely and you'll see how that gun is built. The gunpowder is fused right into the bullet, right down to the very idea and how they mass produce it. These production technologies are way beyond what we've got now, and it's crazy how all of this just sits there unused, like it's waiting to be exploited. Did this civilization really throw down with anyone? Larica scrambled onto the roof. The roof of that huge multi-story building blared right at him, shouting that he needed to. She needs to come up here because she just stumbled on something unreal. MC scrambled over to her, and then he came. He leaned closer and demanded to know what happened, and she jerked her chin toward the side. "Look over there!" So he stared exactly in that direction. With wide eyes, he stared at the massive tower and blurted out, "Is this civilization?" She said, "We could really build something like that." And when they started climbing, it nearly reached the ceiling of the cave, like they were pushing past the sky. And Melt slammed a hole right through it with magic. Now they had a way out. Right? He told you straight up that it's totally worth checking out, and you just start to notice. He suddenly spotted a swarm of flying creatures and blurted, "It looks just like birds!" The moment the bird tore off from the tower, they swooped in right behind it. As he inched closer, he finally realized those things weren't just creatures. They were monsters the size of 3 or 4. 4 stars. And just like that, both of them started to panic because something about it felt seriously wrong. And she shouted that these weren't just demons. They were the higher ones, the kind you can only spot. In the books, they should bolt right now and get the hell out of here. Dark Angel activated a skill, popped to her in an instant, and slashed with his weapon. And she looked terrified, like something awful was about to happen. Monster swung his sword hard and sliced past her, grazing her belongings. Her stomach dropped with a violent twist. She crumpled to the ground, and he panicked like crazy. He blared out to Larica and ripped the trigger, firing his pistol straight at the monster. But every shot pinged and ricocheted. Then he sprinted up to the duff. He slammed a kick into the monster, then shoved it out of the way. This attack left her badly hurt, yet even then she told him not to worry about her. And then he bolted out of there, shouting a loud, no-nonsense refusal, he said. He snapped that this wouldn't work because they were already boxed in, with nowhere left to go. With a grim stare, he realized his weapon was useless against monsters this level. But now he already understood exactly what shape his weapon would take. He was almost there, and the rest was about to click into place as the blade finally came into focus. Evolve to. Would he pull it off? Nope. He had no choice. He had to do it. And with one swing of his hands, he unleashed gold alchemy. Me and I built double-barreled shotguns. Then you realized the structure never lies. Once he knows the structure, it's game over for any uncertainty. Once you see it, the whole operating principle clicks in your head. Yeah, and then, if you really get both the structure and the way it works, golden alchemy doesn't just copy. It's a cheat code that can recreate anything you can imagine. He tore into firing the new weapon. Those shots kept cutting off the moment he started, giving him the power to slaughter monsters with it. With one single shot, she froze in shock. And he shot back, "So, did you really make that ancient artifact?" Magna nodded and basically blurted, "That power is insane!" But then it was still coming up against. He fought through wave after wave of enemies, and still, that wasn't even enough. With a grim, focused look, he realized the ammunition. Tucked inside the weapon were two explosive ideas. The first shot was a brutal lead bullet, blasted out with an insane amount of raw power, like the air itself got punched. It was loaded with the same deadly gunpowder charge again, right down to the last spark. But with a swarm of tiny bullets packed into buckshot, several monsters watched their fate inch closer, one violent impact at a time. Their comrades got wiped out one by one, fury ignited in them, and they shot even higher. Then they began. Lyrica, her face tight with worry, blurted out loudly that it was all because of magic. And then she said that this was a disaster. Those bullets wouldn't land, and they were desperate to blast them from far away with magic. He stared ahead with a grim face, thinking that kind of weapon just wasn't built for the long haul. This attack hits from way farther than magic, slices through faster than spell work, and rips with brutal penetration. He shut his eyes, let the vision hit him, and muttered that a weapon that could do that was the kind of weapon worth fearing. He built a crushing heavy machine gun, then yanked the barrel up at the demons drifting overhead. The air snapped with gunfire, and he started mowing the monsters down, hits landing left and right, while she stared, stunned, thinking that Turns out the weapon was a total pain. Once you fired, you couldn't reload it fast enough to save your life. Barely a moment after he pulled the trigger, the shots scattered wildly, and the accuracy was downright awful. You're stuck in the poor life. Meanwhile, magic is on another level, blasting farther, hitting dead on from a distance. That's exactly how it should be. It should, yeah, but this is a whole different beast. All you've got to do is press your F. You press your finger, and boom, a savage roar rips through the air, tearing everything apart. Ripping enemies apart and then pushing even harder, this perfected weapon was built for one brutal purpose. He cut the machine gun's roar, and the demons instantly panicked, terrified to their core, and started to slip away from him in the air, just like that. Then he dropped the machine gun, his hands trembling like crazy. He yanked his hands back and swore he'd push them away for the moment, until he realized his hands weren't done with him yet. The side effects hit. Numbness spread from the recoil, and suddenly it felt like this thing was never meant to be held in the first place. The protagonist burst toward Lyrica and shouted her name, calling out to her. In a trembling voice, he rushed the healing potion into her hands, and she thanked him, while his serious gaze stayed locked on her. Said they needed to head back because everyone was probably panicking. So the two of them rushed back to the third. Lucia beamed, shouted his name to the rest of the team, and he told them he was unbelievably relieved they were okay too, and then he couldn't even find the words. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw Melts perched on a whole pile like he owned the place. A mountain of monster corpses towered around her as she shouted his name and called out to him. He stepped in and said, Welcome back, Percival. Grinning through it, she claimed a pack of monsters had struck them, while secretly pretending it didn't scare her. She shielded them, then dropped down right beside them and told them the truth. He'd stocked her up with a ton of mana potions. She swayed with a worried look on her face, then burst out a shaky, nervous laugh, like she couldn't stop herself. Honestly, I asked, was she actually helpful? He grabbed her hand, nodded like he meant it, and he told her he was beyond grateful she stepped in and protected everyone. Embarrassment hit her like a wave. Her face burned red, and she couldn't stop wondering, did he? Did he really grab her hand? Is this it? An honest-to-goodness marriage proposal? He rolled up to MC and went, "Yo, this place? It's straight up not safe at all." Then he turned, LMAO. He snapped his head toward him, nodded once, and said they'd discovered a tall tower that climbs straight to the upper levels. A nest of monsters sits inside, but they're tough enough for this. Now move, right now. With a steady, thoughtful glare, he snapped, "Now's not the moment for caution. If we're going to do this, we'll have to take the risk." He'd just created a risk, and when he called him, he made it clear he needed to take this too, even if it meant pushing through that hard line. Forged a shield out of the armor from an ancient cannon he dug up in the ruins, and it looks ready to take the laws. With the shield gone, he lunges forward and demands he cover the front lines, then nods, fully trusting him and promising he'll have his back. Lucia stepped up to Liz, waved her over, and told her that staying here was... It was terrifying, so she grabbed her and pulled her to her feet, and the second she could talk again, she agreed in a shaky, confused voice. He spun toward them, waved them over, and promised them that everything was going to be okay. He'd drive them all straight to the surface, she called his name. Her resolve snapped into place, and she vowed she'd try too. They'll try, Percival snatched the brand new shield and... They couldn't believe it. This monster of a thing was unbelievably huge, yet it somehow felt light in their hands. Even Mithril's shine couldn't touch that kind of lightness. He forged a metal nobody's ever seen. Larica. He closed the distance and hit him with that question. Watch his face light up like, wait, you mean it? And that's not the end. He can even remake ancient relics. Tell the whole world, and you'd set off chaos so loud, it'll be downright terrifying. Terrible, but you said it. For now, he's still their rock-solid ally. For now, they've got one mission. Get out of here alive, no matter what. 5 days after the vanguard vanishes, the forward camp turns into a dragon's graveyard, and everyone's staring in stunned silence. People erupted in shock and shouted, "Did the vanguard rescue the association, Professor? They say he was attacked by..." Monsters prowl around the Great Abyss Falls. Now tell me, where's the second professor? So what happened to the vanguard? Did they really all get wiped out? As I, Victor, dragged Klaus's transformed head into view for the shocked crowd. And he begged for forgiveness because he knew that the young professor couldn't choke down his craving for the unknown, and demanded they go with the vanguard, even as they stepped in to cover for people who were totally helpless like them. A worried girl rushed up to him begging, "What happened to my sister?" And he snapped that he couldn't bear to leave their body behind. He looked at those bodies, doomed for the monsters to devour, and tried to salvage what he could. But as a frail old man, he could only haul one thing at a time. The girl broke down into tears and he snapped, "It's all on me, because I didn't stop." He has to stop Klaus, so he throws everything he's got into finishing what he started before time runs out. Make sure this wild expedition doesn't steal another soul from the client. He announces the 38th Great Expedition is finally over and tells everyone, "You're all getting 2 million G is just the start. Any group that got members wiped out because the association messed up will also get an extra 200 million G thrown their way. Compensation. This is the Alchemists Association's official word, and that man flat out admitted it. In dungeon exploration, death isn't a possibility. It's guaranteed. If he's ready to shoulder that kind of responsibility, then the Red Hounds won't have a single word left to say. When the black lilies bloomed, the girl's tears finally broke loose, and she vowed she'd bring her sister's bones home at least. But even the black lilies by themselves couldn't pull it off. Victor Bode thanked them anyway for understanding. He smirked like a cat that just stole the cream, thinking, "This is plenty." As long as the prices of alchemical goods stayed right where they were, they'd get their money back, no strings attached, and nothing would stand in their way as they pushed their research forward. All the campers went wide-eyed when Magna suddenly blared out, his voice shaking the whole camp. Everyone was shocked to the core. They can't let him fool them. This corpse is a fake. The moment they heard his voice, every single one of them spun around, and they lit up with pure joy. Pure joy lit up their faces when they finally saw their commanders and the members of the... Only a handful of the Cat's Paws squad were still standing, and he shouted at the top of his... Stunned at how they'd even ended up here, he stayed stone calm and said that they hauled themselves out on foot, just like that, from a dizzying 4,360 meters deep, right off the edge, like it was nothing. By the way, Lyrica snapped, loud and furious, that the monsters weren't the ones hunting them. It was him. The Alchemist Association got spooked the moment they saw his golden alchemy, and they decided to wipe him out under the cover of some grand expedition, and Lucia and Liz looked dead serious as they said, "We're all..." Everyone watched, and there was no point in even dreaming of escaping this mess. The moment they saw him move, they ripped their weapons out and got ready to strike instantly. Victor sprang to his feet from the crate and snapped his body sharply toward him. He burst into loud laughter and shouted that it was absolutely horrible for the Alchemist Association to be slammed with a murder accusation. They were spitting out the most awful words, and then he snapped his eyes open. Eyes that had turned a wild new color, and with a rage-filled stare, he bellowed out his declaration. He declared that because of them, he'd now have to wipe out everyone. "Everyone, listen." He instantly surged, and in the blink of an eye, he transformed into a monstrous tower. The monster unleashed the power of chaotic evolution, and everything it became felt like chaos gaining a pulse. He shot a wide grin and claimed the 38th Great Expedition had been wiped clean off the map by the monsters of the Dragon Graveyard. That's how the report would read. No ifs, ands, or buts. At first glance, everything looked normal, until the crowd whipped their weapons up and aimed straight at him. He snapped at him like he was a monster, then screamed that everyone should swarm and attack him. Surprisingly, he didn't just move. He ripped ahead, using the sheer speed of a wyvern. Then he bolted behind it in a flash. Right behind them, he unleashed the raw power of a behem, and with a sharp wave of his hand, sent a whole crowd flying into the sky. Then Hydra heads burst out along his body, and he started spreading a poison that wrecks the body and triggers terrifying abnormal conditions. He laid down the rule: living beings don't just exist, they evolve, adapting to whatever their world throws at them. Then he finally cracked the environment behind it, and the supreme secret fueling his living alchemy. Alchemy is all about pulling the primordial into the world again, the source of evolution that held every possible form of life all at once. Of life. They'll put his living alchemy to the test and see which one reigns stronger, his power or what comes next. His golden alchemy, so wild and holy it feels like it was ripped straight from God's own hands. The protagonist wore a grim, serious look, as if the world had just turned against him. He slapped the shotgun to life, leveled it at him. He shrugged it off like it didn't matter. Then he launched himself off the cliff. Cliff then lit him up with 2 shotguns and opened fire. Victor snapped out of the way in a blink, dodging every one of his shots. He lunged forward and smashed him with a brutal hand strike, but he still managed to leap out of the way. He snapped the gun up at him, fired on the spot, and slammed a shot into his hand. Then he stared at his weapon and warned, "This power, this form, this technology isn't." So what is he really doing in this world? Did he actually drag an ancient artifact with him? Then he snapped his body into that shell again and said that, but he snapped into it right away and adapted. He adapted to every situation and environment, then burst forward, sprinted right up to him, and swung his hand. He grabbed my hand and shouted, asking if I could keep pace with his evolution. Percival barreled toward him, unleashed a skill, and slammed a shield into existence. He snapped his shield up to block the blow, Lyrica now wearing a Sirius. He cracked a grin, pulled out a handful of knives, and then swore that "Don't just dismiss them." She slammed shadow binding onto him, and MC countered with golden magic. Mastered an alchemy spell that could turn shotguns into bazookas. Then he fired. Barreled straight at him, then slammed in with a brutal hit, and a massive explosion tore the air apart. Everyone erupted in cheers. Sure, he'd finally beaten him, until the story cut off right there. But first, clock this. He's not falling at all. She blared his name and shoved a warning into his hands. Something weird was going down, and it was happening right now. Blood and flesh tore into the scene. Then, right at that exact moment, everything snapped into place. It all snapped into bats. Suddenly, they burst free and flew right back to the main body, and he regenerated in a blink. He froze in shock at what he saw, then blurted out, "Are you?" If he'd fully recovered, Victor had already declared it. He'd won. Had warned him. Chaotic evolution was tearing through the past, remaking the primordial from scratch. Now every cell in his body acts like its own creature, and he can stab through them, rip them apart. The monster snapped its mouth open where its head used to be, and swore this was the absolute limit of his golden alka, even though you can't fully destroy it. Alchemy? Magnus' face went stone cold as he snapped that down, then admitted his limit was crystal clear. Then it all clicked. He finally saw the whole picture. A forward base, a battlefield packed with resources, and the answer staring him in the face. This place is loaded with materials that could smash a shell like his in seconds. Still, he won't touch it, or worse, he flat out can't use it. Living alchemy is alchemy forged to control things no one else dares touch. You can control living organisms at the cell level, so yeah, that means there's a way to shut it down. When the right conditions hit, protein gets permanently altered and loses its power for good. Function again. There it is, a structure that fits the property perfectly. And then he strode right over. He darted to the weapon crates and unleashed golden alchemy. I rigged a flamethrower and kicked things off. Then he lunged in, going straight for the attack. Victor snapped as he swung that weapon, and then Victor screamed, screeched in agony, and Lucia and Liz lit up with joy, shouting that it was finally deep. If they turned him into coal, he'd never be able to regenerate or split their cells, and way beyond what they can. He seemed totally fine, then hit me with, "This is way too naive." He leaned in and told him loud and clear, "Heat wrecks protein, so living beings get that instinctual dread, like fear sparked in their bones. Fire, true, all true, until it hits a certain line, and then everything shifts. Living things pack a ton of water inside them. He isn't any different. Not a single dead tree stood dry in winter, and no matter how hard she tried, that pathetic little flame just couldn't burn through that body. He'd never make it to life itself, so he sprinted straight at him, ready to tear into him with a full-on attack. But the protagonist stayed perfectly still and calmly told them that landing a high-profile role like a professor, yeah, it looked like he'd fully snapped and started treating everyone like total idiots. And then, did he really just... You'd think, as a fellow alchemist, he'd realize how pointless it was to try and roast his massive body with that tiny flame. Then he froze the moment he heard something, and he snapped out that this whole fight, this flame, and even that whole conversation was just a cover, because everything was needed to hide. He tucked away his real trump card where it wouldn't even catch his eye, like a decoy meant to throw everyone off. He spun around, a worried look flashing across his face. As the sky snapped into view, Melt triggered the Apocalypse skill right then and there. He honed his skill and blasted a perfectly aimed, soul-searing beam straight into him. He froze in shock and blurted her name at the top of his lungs. He blurted the question out like he couldn't believe it. She was still alive, she laughed, smirking as she said that anything could happen, and you couldn't even process it, not after those wounds. Survival felt impossible. He snapped his gaze to the side and blurted, "So, is this guy for real?" "Wait, he saved the girl who tried to kill him?" "Nah, it gets worse, because there's more to it. Something else was going on. This matters more than anything. One clean hit from the apocalypse, and it's over." "That's horrible," he snapped, yanking his hands over his head and then blurting, "Oh." She's yelling like it'll fix everything, but does she even know what she's doing? Is she really about to walk away from justice? From the Scarlet? A Charlotte disaster erupts and turns everything around it to ashes. She still remembered the days she sobbed as a kid in a burning city, with flames licking the sky like it wanted her gone. So, her power obliterated everything. Then, through the burning flames, a man staggered out. She screamed for help at the top of her lungs, and then bam! She went completely stunned. She slapped her hands over her face and blurted, "I just won!" He couldn't stand being there for another second. Then Victor strode up to him. He crept up behind her and growled that nothing at all had changed. She was the one who slaughtered them all, and then he lifted her head. She snapped her eyes open and declared she couldn't look away from the truth. She's a walking disaster. Every step she takes drags death with it, and somehow her very existence feels like a curse. But he can channel her power in the name of justice, and she'll have to serve the Alchemist Association. In the name of justice, only this path lets her finally pay for what she's done. Otherwise, they'll lock her back in that dark hole again, he barked it out with total confidence. Shh. She's about to be left on her own again. Nobody's going to need her, and nobody's going to welcome her in. His words started rattling her nerves, but she snapped back and remembered how MC had come at her earlier, and told her before he headed back to the cemetery he needed to ask her for a favor. When they got back to the top, they'd end up face to face with Professor Wiseman again. Then he'd come looking for her power. In that battle, she looked utterly lost, until he leaned in and said that after the fight with him, he finally got how his alchemy ticks, turning bullets and blades into something that could. He couldn't take him down, no matter what he tried. He'd just shrug it off, so to finally beat him, they had to unleash colossal heat. He had no clue what kind of deal she had with the Alchemist Association, but one thing hit him hard. It definitely wasn't normal. So he pushed for a deal. If she helped them, he'd keep quiet about the guilt. Melt stared in confusion, because she just told him about a guild that tried to kill him. So what was she even going to say next? He couldn't wrap his head around it. But it hit him. He needed her right now. He flashed a small smile, called out her name, nodded in agreement, and then said that Victor La was begging for her power right now. He needed it desperately. She slammed the words out loud. She could still come back, and under the association's roof, she'd pay for her sin. Suddenly, she blurted it out loud, so loud it echoed, her eyes wide as she cut herself off mid-sentence. Magna's wide smile was exactly what she needed, and she lit up with gratitude for every single thing he'd done for her. He snapped with rage and swung his hand up, ready to attack her. Right then, Lucia suddenly used pull off the dance of dual blades skill. Cross. He swung up his other hand to strike, then Liz exploded forward and buried him with a brutal kick using the skill flowers, birds. Birds slice through the wind beneath the moon, their forms blazing, and then a phoenix strike hammers down like destiny. He yanked the Hydra's heads out of that blazing inferno. Then the burn hit hard, scorching. With a grim glare, he opened fire, blasting buckshot straight at it. Melt leapt off the cliff, flashed a smirk, and cracked open a mana potion like it was nothing. And then used the Apocalypse skill, fivefold, a simultaneous launch, compress it hard. And then the world's lights flicker out forever. That energy beam hit with such brutal force that Victor's body couldn't survive the impact. He couldn't take it. Then he started to rapidly burn, and she landed. plopped right into the crater the attack carved into the ground, came up to him with a look of shock spread across his face. She thought Ash was gone for good, like he'd never even existed. And then, she. Instantly, he melts the solid body into blazing plasma. This power is the kind that could annihilate them. The world crumbled behind them, and the surviving squad sprinted straight for their leader. Leaders stepped forward and greeted them with bright, joyful smiles. Percival grinned and said, like he already knew what was coming, that they owed it all to the people back from. The cat's paw went to her, and the man called the commander and demanded to know what went down underground and what they'd really seen in there. He replied, they were. They'd hash all of this out later, right there with the guild, but for now, it was time to gear up for their return to the surface. They struck a fire, threw food on the heat, and tore into it with drinks in hand. And that's how the 38th Great Expedition finally comes to a close. It all boiled down to one jaw-dropping number. They'd reached a depth of 4,360 meters, far beyond anything recorded before, and it even led to the discovery of an ultra-ancient, an ancient civilization. And even with a find this massive, only 225 people were counted as participants. 223 made it out alone, separated from everyone else, and wore a faint, aching smile like it was already over. Lucia smiled, then swept right up to her and grabbed her hand, dragging her toward. It brought her right to Liz, and the two of them started eating together. Watching it all made her light up with real happiness. She finally smiled. Then Victor proved he'd cheat death by slipping into the world as a fly. He swore he'd slipped away at the last second, but when he finally showed up, it was pure, crushing humiliation. Humiliation burned in him, and he swore he'd never forgive them. Pathetic humans. But he had to move fast, warn everyone, then snatch his body back. Alchemy. It wouldn't run on an insect's brain, because right near where he flew, a frog snapped him up and ate him. So in the end, it all boiled down to just 2 deaths. 3 days after the 38th Great Expedition finally came roaring back home, the Adventurers Guild hauled in the sponsors for a tense debrief about the expedition's results right after Percival. With a grim face, he snapped his name out loud and claimed he was the expedition team's leader, then declared the meeting officially open, ready to tackle the next part of the plan. The jaw-dropping results of the 38th Great Expedition, and in the office, too, representatives from the Ancient History Society and the Private Magic Academy, where secrets don't stay buried. Me, one of the Blacksmiths' Union, standing shoulder to shoulder with the rest of the Union. A top spot on the Alchemists' Association Council. And the protagonist. He spun toward him and said the leader of this expedition, one of the cat. That's the Paul group delivering the report. Paul rose from his chair and snapped, I asked for your love and favor. Then the expedition kicked off, diving into the dungeon exactly how they planned. After that, they finally pushed into the Dragon Graveyard, an excavation site that felt cursed, and its silence said everything. Without a single hitch, he tore ahead, leaving the excavation team behind as the advance party pressed on. Vanished into the unknown, down at a brutal depth of 928 meters. Meters at the Great Abyssal Falls, just like the letter said. They got jumped by the Alchemist Association's crew. Everyone fell under attack except the Alchemist Association council member got backed by everyone who mattered. He was totally caught off guard, and he blurted out that this was what he said right after their attack. The advance party plummeted into the Great Abyssal Falls, fighting for their lives just to stay afloat. They slammed their way to a stop at a depth of 4,360 meters, and the moment they did, they kicked off their search for a way back to the surface, and right along the route they stumbled on massive underground ruins, locked inside a giant cave before the... Hearing the tale, the Ancient History Society rep lit up and asked, So, are there underground ruins? He said these ruins were so massive they felt less like ruins and more like an entire city, like the whole city. The city had turned into a den for higher demons, and with the artifacts they scavenged from the site, they managed to A few days later, they finally caught back up with the excavation team, and then they crashed into Professor Wiseman head-on, fought him hard, and took him down. This is the whole rundown of the 38th Great Expedition, because now he would. He was itching to spill every detail of what they saw, and then go straight into the chaos of selling the found artifacts, starting with a member. The Alchemist Association's rep basically scoffed, calling this one a total bargain bin show. They scrambled to cover up that they couldn't shield the professor, so they fed him all these excuses instead, trying to bury the truth. All those lies. Then boom, the whole place erupted and everyone snapped over what he said. And Larica blared, "Do they really think they'll slip past this?" The expedition team laid eyes on it all themselves, and he said, voice cutting sharp, "Self." They wore confident smiles, like they'd cooked this up together. So why on earth would anyone trust witnesses who just happened to share the same interests? Her rage surged, and she snapped out loud, What did he just say?" Percival shot his hand up and demanded she calm down. Then he stumbled over his next words. He asked, "What?" With a stone-cold serious look, he stared ahead, because they swore the depth hit 4,360 meters. Trying to come back from there without supplies is straight up impossible, so there's no point in paying a reward for... No, not fiction. Listen, the guild should pay for losing a talented alchemist. And Grace marched right into the off. He stepped into the office and flashed a calm smile, telling them they'd better prove they really have stumbled upon an ancient. Civilization shifted, then a suit of armor was hauled into the office, and she grinned like it was a blessing bell. It was forged with sacred power, then stacked with layers of protective magic. This isn't just armor, it's top-tier defense that can shrug off a crossbow bolt and even stop a bullet. But he grinned and declared, "Of course it was their masterpiece. So why drag it all the way here if it wasn't meant to be shown?" MC used. He cracked open gold alchemy, forged an assault rifle, and he started unloading shots straight into the armor, and everyone was stunned, speechless. When they spotted the massive hole the shots tore into the world. And then he dropped the bombshell. This thing was the weapon of some ancient civilization. Turns out they were building guns, but in their world, firearms are seen as basically second-rate compared to magic. In the ruined maze, weapons piled up in every shape, rifles, cannons, and more, waiting to be grabbed. Cannons and more, everything hit them at once. When the representatives finally saw it, they went pale and blurted, "Is there a bullet that can truly pierce Ora Chalcombe?" Then he blasted again and again, never once reloading, while a runner for the Blacksmiths' Union sprinted in. He snatched a cartridge case off the floor, staring at it with wild excitement. Then he shouted, He blurted, "Wait, are the bullet and gunpowder mashed together? And what kind of power is this? And how much smoke does it kick out?" That smoke gave it away. This wasn't any ordinary gunpowder. He slapped the cartridge on the table for everyone to see, then said, like he'd been claiming all along, that his analysis had finally proven it. It even relied on some mystery gunpowder made from plant fibers. Even after all that, they still think he's covering for something. So he snapped back, denied it hard, and said this. This has to be plenty, at least for an engineer like him. Exactly because he's an engineer, he gets it. Perfectly, every time, like the whole idea was made for him. So this is the perfect form firearms are destined to reach one day. Does that mean the tech and ideas in their world aren't real inventions at all? The Ancient History Society representative blurted it out with loud, starstruck awe. So, wait, does that mean there really was an... Millions of years ago, two strangers out of the same impossible advanced civilization closed in on a board member of the Alchemists Association. He slammed the announcement down and loudly declared that the association was ending the contract. So they'd snag the artifacts, and honestly, it was a brilliant plan. But he didn't even believe there were. So, there won't be any objections, right? And if he's hit with shock at all this, then he's already spiraling. Wearing a worried look, He couldn't shake the fact that this was the very first time he'd ever seen a weapon like this, so he had to wonder, did they really dive that deep? With the descent dropping under 4,000 meters, they stumble on an ancient civilization. Then comes the twist. The professor was trying to kill them too, so why would he even care? But hold up, something else hits harder right now. He rips himself out of his chair, slams his fist into the air, refuses them out loud, and shouts that they can't do this, according to the contract. So they got the right of first refusal, pay whatever it cost, and every single artifact would belong to them. He couldn't help but think that if these artifacts were real, they'd never let any other organization get their hands on them. Grace slid the document to him, smiled, and said, and then, right there, he could finally sign. He yanked the contract from her hands, tore it out of her grip, snatched it. He signed it on the spot, then blurted out, loud as day, that no one was allowed to complain. With a sly grin, she snatched the contract and tore the cloth away. He yanked his hand away from those ancient things on the table and snapped that if that was true, then he... Here are all the artifacts the expedition hauled back with them, and then he snapped in rage. He jabbed a finger to the side and barked that he didn't care about this junk at all. Then he forced himself to hand over the... Magnus smirked and said he wouldn't let the rifle go because it wasn't an artifact. Fuming, he snapped back and demanded at full volume what the hell he'd just said, because he swore he'd said it first. It turned out this thing was a weapon forged by an ancient civilization. He nodded and said the whole design was ripped straight from weapons used by an ancient. He didn't just stop at building a civilization. He forged the rifle himself with alchemy, then drove the whole thing by selling alchemical goods. If you're an alchemist and you're not in the association, they don't just arrest you, they execute you. No questions asked. That's their rule, and that's it. Rage surged through him. He slammed the chair beside him, roared at him, and shouted a brutal insult, a path that cut off mid-word. Adventurer, go on. He leaned in and asked if he really thought he could mock the alchemists. With impunity hanging over everything, he snapped. He'd had enough, and he said... He snarled in pure, terrifying rage and blurted, "What the hell was that noise?" They started walking toward him, closed the distance, and said they wanted to settle this right there. The professor himself, maybe this was real, and it hit him hard. They stepped up on their own, handled every single term in the contract, and proved, loud and clear, that they're the ones who can endure and genuinely respect. They needed to hold themselves back. No one was allowed to get cocky now, and the Alchemists Association council member was visibly terrified. He pressed him, asking if that was supposed to shut him down and keep him from getting cocky, because some pathetic adventurer had the nerve to talk to his employer like that. Grace. Grace strode up and snapped that they were clearly missing what was going on, because they were trying to shut up the map. You're not the boss here. This contract locks in both sides, employers and adventurers, equal partners, not some master and servant setup. And if he keeps humiliating himself, this stops being a personal feud and turns into something far bigger. But the feud between the organizations has to get settled the hard way, by the law. Laws of the country. So what, he's really fine with that? Rage flared in his chest as he growled. Then he swallowed it down and marched straight toward the exit, jammed his finger at him, then roared that today, he'd let them walk away. But only today, he stormed out of the office and slammed the door shut behind him. And right after that, Marika burst out laughing and said that was just the usual line from a petty villain. Good, because he deserved it. Percival let out a shaky breath of relief and said, "The contract's signed, so it looks like we can finally to sell everything for a great price." And the main character stepped up to Grace, looking her dead in the eye and telling her how truly grateful he was. She refused her help, shaking her head hard, and snapped back, "I." A smile that says, "The Adventurers Guild is here to protect you." And then, there they stand with sad faces. Faces said all the artifacts would go to the Alchemist Association after all. Centuries before our world even had the science, he dreamed of studying this. Then he yanked out a He yanked a bag open, and just like that, told them he had something for them. Then he dumped out a whole spread of different things. He stared at the projects he dug up in the underground city, spread out on the table, and suddenly everything that happened on that expedition came roaring back. And bragged that while they hunted through the ruins, he scooped up every artifact he spotted, no matter if he couldn't even figure out what it did. He'd break them down one by one, lock every device into memory. These replicas were forged with alchemy from the data he'd gathered. And once he had that, it only mended what time had broken, while the structure and materials were recreated with zero change, down to the last detail. The Blacksmiths Union rep stared in shock and blurted out, loud as a bell, "So you're really ready to hand this over to us?" He'd claimed he had samples, so he could copy it perfectly, down to the molecular structure, using alchemy. But he had no idea how to crank all of this out on an industrial scale. If the tech can't be copied reliably, then it's not full-on tech yet, and adventurers only here to chase the treasure. Then the real specialists take over. He'd been hoping this could push humanity forward, and when Lucia stretched out, a satisfied smile lit up her face. Look how wiped out she was. Larica stepped in with a warm smile and told her the order was finally complete. Liz stepped up to him and demanded to know if he was really sure this was the right move. He snapped his gaze to her and demanded, "What did you mean?" And she answered, said that those artifacts hid deadly dangers, and Percival went quiet, staring like he was piecing it all together in his head. He warned that once those weapons were churned out on a massive scale, people would start slaughtering each other. That thought alone hit him like lightning. Goosebumps erupted. MC even admitted he'd been wrestling with it too, but the truth was, technology itself, weapons themselves aren't good or evil. What they can do through their development might just save lives. To save people from the monster threat. And that's why he made the choice to decide trying to act like they could just exist on their own, whether it's true or not, would be wildly presumptuous. He leaned in with a small, smirking smile, like he still believed in people. But the next second, he shook his head and flat out said he can't shoulder that kind of responsibility. Grace made it crystal clear she wasn't letting the expedition's results get swept under the rug. She clapped her hands and lit up with pure joy on her face. She told them, "Look, gentlemen, big thinkers, great researchers, no matter what, I'm truly grateful to you. They'll be rewarded for what they pulled off. Every win will be etched into history, and all the groups involved are about to get a major promotion. 1 star at minimum, she's making it official, right here, right now, and everyone's buzzing with pure joy." Percival threw out an apology that admitted the Red Hounds had been dragged into it and forced to. They rejected it, and that shocked everyone, so they blurted out, "We're already a 4-star group." And it could have hit 5 stars. Yet he shook his head and said 5 stars for them was a burden too heavy to carry. And he understood. He believed in his bones that they deserved that promotion. They earned it on merit, plain and simple. Plus, the Red Hounds are family-first types, not the kind to take orders with that over-the-top bossy crap. Larica let out a tired sigh and blurted, "I don't want to end up like some burnt-out old man." Black Lily grabs 4 stars first, then rockets to 5 fast, snatching the lead right from the Red Hounds. She froze at his grin, because he basically told her that picking a fight wasn't just allowed, it was a perk reserved for the young. And if she could do it, then so could they. Cats with those tiny paws, somehow proving they were more than capable. Capable of climbing all the way up to a 4-star group level, he said it himself, standing there as the leader of one. Everyone felt the happiness hit instantly, and Magna turned to him with a grateful thank you for his kind words. Grace said this had nothing to do with the promotion. She only wanted to reward his outstanding service in the Friends. In the great expedition of the Cat's Paw group, they marched on, because when it was all over, they'd get a house of their own. And the moment they realized it, they were completely stunned. After that, they all banded together and sped toward the Kremlin's elite residential district, Lucia included. With a grin blazing on his face, he couldn't believe how massive that house was. Liz froze in shock and blurted, "Wait, are they really going to live here?" and he just stared, completely baffled. She laid it out. She said it looked exactly like that, and back in the office, she explained the guild house was the guild's own system for giving everyone a real base. She pushed in close, whispered that the chief of staff himself demanded it, like this whole free base was made to fuel the most promising groups. They stepped in, and shock hit. This place was roomy on the inside, too. That means cleaning here is going to be a nightmare, he muttered. He said it looked like the guild's housekeepers swept the place clean while they were out on missions, and Lucia spun to face him. He shouted that everything here was top-notch, and they finally pulled up at the dining room. The room erupted into searching eyes, and she spotted a phone. Then she demanded to know if the very same magical artifact powered the expedition. Right? He told you that you could use it to order food, and there was even a menu, and she was completely stunned by it. They blared that they should try it, and she practically begged for crab, so they stormed into the bedroom, where the girls flopped onto the bed and squealed about how unbelievably soft it was. And once Liz slipped into the next room, that nice smell hit her, and she immediately started scanning the place, looking around. He paced up beside him and blurted, "So what kind of room is this?" "Was the living room, right?" She leaned in from behind the door, yelled for the two of them, and said, with a cheerful voice, she told them, "Hurry, get here now!" and then dropped the bombshell. "There's a bath right in this house." They slipped into the bathhouse, and she lit up with pure delight, while he closed the distance, eyes bright with curiosity, and asked, "Do you really use salamander scales to heat the water? It looks like..." So much money got dumped into this house, and Lucia, smiling from ear to ear, shouted that they should all strip down and bathe together, right there. He called it an awesome idea. Then he paused, ready to glance around. The house. So they had to go first. Then she snatched his. His hand squeezed his, and he nodded toward her, saying, "She's got it all." She said everything together. And yeah, both of them were dying of embarrassment. Because of that, he blurted out, loud, what she was saying, and she smiled and shrugged, like it didn't matter at all. They've fought through too much together to be strangers now, living under the same roof like they're basically family, right? Heat rushed to his cheeks as embarrassment hit, and he blurted out that it was way too early for all of that. He called Liz and told her to spill what she'd been thinking, like right now, because this mattered a lot. Shame flooded her face as she lowered her head and confessed. If he didn't mind, he was absolutely blown away by this. They stared at it, baffled by what was happening to them, until, after what felt like forever, the girls finally came toward them, right as they were about. She strode into the dining room after the bath, called out to him, and told him, "We're already out." And then she stopped. MC spun around and grinned, saying they'd arrived perfectly because the food had just been delivered. He and Melts dropped into their seats at the table and toasted, wishing each other a full-on bon appétit right there like the night was about to start. He snatched a crab and leaned in, asking, "Wait, how are you even supposed to eat something like that?" They leaned in and asked, "So, is this your first time eating?" "He's chewing crab, but you've got to smash that shell open first. Crack it open, devour the meat inside, and then, when you pour..." Lucia slid the lemon over, and as he poured the juice, everything tasted way better. Then he thanked her, and the three of them dug in. He ate with a grin spreading across his face, thinking, "Wow, this elastic texture is insanely amazing." The longer he kept chewing, the juice exploded across his tongue and spread that rich taste everywhere in his mouth, like it was taking over. So much that they were nearly... He grinned at this dish and kept devouring it bite after bite, stuffing himself with every kind of dish he could get his hands on. He said, wearing a satisfied grin, that the tomato risotto at the end was perfect. The end was so sweet it made Liz grin, eyes gleaming as she looked a little. She looked a little uneasy, raised her hand, and blurted out that since, even after everyone finally let their guard down, she couldn't stop herself, she still needed to ask her question. He jabbed a finger at Melt, sitting right there with them, chugging alcohol and shouting loudly as he demanded, "Why is she here?" They both stared at her in dead silence, totally baffled. They blurted out in shock, "Why is she here?" Their voices shaking as the moment hit them. Their reaction left her completely stunned, and she burst into a loud scream from pure shock.